Hello everyone, I know you are going to use this video for falling asleep, so before that, like this video, subscribe to the channel and let me know where you are from, also what time is it. The first thing you need to know is this: no one in Hollow's Edge speaks about the house at the end of Renfield Road. It isn't because the house is abandoned, though it is, rotting quietly behind its fence with windows boarded like dead eyes. It's because everyone who has ever stepped inside has disappeared. And those who vanished didn't vanish quietly. Their screams were heard, their shadows were seen, their bodies never found. The town files it under local folklore, the kind of things small towns cling to in order to explain away real horror. But that doesn't stop the whispers. People still claim to see lights flickering at night behind those boards, hear knocking sounds when no one is near, and smell rot mixed with burning wood carried through the air. Some even swear they've heard voices calling their name from inside, the same voices of friends who went missing years ago. And tonight the house is waking again. Noah Graves knew all of these stories. He grew up in Hollow's Edge, which meant the warnings were as natural as learning to look both ways before crossing the road. His parents told him never to walk past the house, never to answer if someone called from behind the fence, and never to touch anything that came out of its yard. He thought it was nonsense when he was younger, until he watched a group of older kids go inside one Halloween. 6 entered, 4 came out, shaking and pale, swearing they saw the walls move and the doors lock themselves. The other 2 were never found. The police report read runaways, but the town never believed it. Noah remembered the screams that night, high, raw, and cut off too fast. That sound never left him. Years later, Noah had left Hollow's Edge for college, then the city, chasing the kind of life his parents always said was impossible here. He told himself he was free of it, free of the suffocating traditions, free of the cursed house. But then came the phone call. His sister, Mia, was missing. She was last seen near Renfield Road. Her car was found parked just 2 streets away from the boarded property, the driver's side door left ajar, her purse inside, engine still warm. When Noah returned, the whole town looked at him, with pity already hardened into mourning. They whispered the same thing they always did: the house took her. He wanted to punch every one of them for how calmly they said it, as if it was just another Tuesday tragedy, as if his sister was gone and the story had already been written. But he refused to accept that. He refused to let his sister be another name on the long, unspoken list of Hollow's Edge. So on the night of her disappearance, under a swollen moon that glowed like a pale wound in the sky, Noah walked toward the house. The first thing he noticed wasn't the shape of it, but the silence. The rest of town was filled with night noise. Crickets, rustling leaves, the occasional car engine in the distance. But here, around the sagging fence of Renfield Road's final property, the air was strangled quiet, thick and pressing, as if the house itself swallowed every sound that dared get too close. His footsteps echoed too loudly, crunching gravel and dried weeds. The boards nailed across the windows were warped with age, blackened by mold, yet every nail looked new. Silver glints catching the moonlight, as if someone had been repairing them constantly. He stared too long and thought he saw the boards twitch, as though something behind them shifted against the wood. The front gate was chained, rust thick on its links. But the padlock hung open, swinging like someone had just unhooked it minutes before. His stomach tightened. Someone had been here, or something wanted him inside. He stepped through. The yard smelled of wet earth and charred wood. The grass was dead in strips, not from neglect but in patterns. Circular burns etched into the soil as though someone had dragged fire across it. Noah swallowed hard and told himself it was teenagers. The same excuse adults always gave, except the circles pulsed faintly, like embers cooling after being smothered. The porch sagged under his weight. The boards groaned like voices, a low creak that almost formed words if he listened too closely. He shook his head, fighting off the panic. He'd promised himself he would not turn back until he knew if Mia was here. He'd rather face the house than face his parents' eyes. If he gave up, the door was splintered but locked. He pulled. It wouldn't budge. He shoved harder. Nothing. He thought of kicking it, but before he could, he felt a cool draft brush against his cheek. He froze. The door's lock clicked by itself, and with a soft groan, it swung open, leaving a mouth of darkness yawning wide. Noah's breath came fast. Every part of him screamed to run. But there it was, faint and impossible to ignore Maya's voice. Noah. It floated from the dark, quiet but desperate, as if she was just a few feet away. He stepped inside. The smell hit first, rot and wet wood mixed with the faintest trace of smoke. The air was heavy, damp enough to cling to his throat. His flashlight beam cut through the dark, catching walls lined with peeling wallpaper. The pattern was once floral, but the flowers had bled into one another, petals melting into faces, faces twisted in silent screams. He blinked, looked again, and it was only wilted roses. Still, his stomach churned. The house breathed. He could feel it under his shoes, the floor shifting slightly, like the boards rose and fell with a hidden lung. Each time he stepped, the walls quivered, faint dust shaking loose. His light landed on a staircase ahead, but it looked wrong. The banister stretched too long, bending upward into shadows, higher than any ceiling should allow. The top vanished into black, like it didn't lead upstairs but somewhere else entirely. Again, he heard her. Noah, help, this time, closer. His chest tightened.
Mia!
His voice cracked as it echoed, but the echo didn't sound like him. It repeated with a cruel slowness, syllables stretched, warped, until the word Mia came back as laughter. His flashlight flickered. The beam caught something on the far wall. A family portrait, glass cracked, frame crooked. Dust covered the faces, but as he wiped it with his sleeve, his blood ran cold. The family in the photo wasn't strangers. It was his family. Him, Mia, their parents, smiling in front of a house that looked exactly like this one, except brighter, alive. His younger self stared back with eyes that seemed too aware, too knowing. And his sister's image, frozen in that photo, had her mouth open, caught mid-scream though the rest of the family smiled. The floor shuddered beneath him, a sharp knock echoing from under the boards, like fists pounding from below. Once, twice, 3 times, then silence. He staggered back, nearly dropping the light, and then the basement door creaked open. Slowly, with a patience to deliberate, the door widened, blackness spilling out thicker than the dark around him. Cold air poured from the opening, carrying whispers that crawled against his skin. And again, her voice. Please, Noah, I'm here. He wanted to believe it. God, he wanted to. But something was wrong. The voice wasn't just calling. It was coaxing, pulling, almost smiling as it begged. He tightened his grip on the flashlight. He had a choice: turn back and leave forever, or step toward that basement where every missing soul of Hollow's edge might still linger. His heart thundered, sweat burning his palms. He stepped closer. The light caught the basement stairs, slick with moisture, edges splintered like teeth. With each step down, the air grew colder, heavier, until it felt like he was wading through water. His flashlight beam jittered, catching flashes of movement along the stone walls, shadows that darted away too quickly. He told himself it was rats, though he heard no scratching, no skittering, only the steady drip of unseen water. At the bottom, the basement stretched wider than the house itself should allow. Stone walls curved into a cavern, ceiling too high, disappearing into black. Strange symbols covered the floor, burned deep into the stone, glowing faintly like dying embers. In the center, a single chair stood, and in that chair, Maya, his throat closed. It was her, pale, shivering, hands bound with rope, head slumped forward. Her hair hid her face, but he knew her shape, her small frame, the pink jacket she wore that night. Relief surged through him. She was alive. He rushed forward. "I'm here, Mia, I've got you." Her head snapped up. It wasn't Mia. Her eyes were pits of black. Her mouth stretched wider than skin should allow. And when she spoke, it was every missing voice at once, overlapping in a chorus that rattled the stones. "Welcome home, Noah." The basement door slammed shut behind him. The flashlight went out, and in the pitch black, dozens of hands reached from the walls. Darkness. Not the kind that comes with night, but something older, thicker, and alive. The kind that doesn't just fill space, but takes things from it. The kind that swallows sound and breath and hope. That's what surrounded Noah after the flashlight died. He couldn't see his own hands. Couldn't hear his own heartbeat. Couldn't even be sure he was still standing in the basement. For a moment, he felt like he was floating, disjointed from gravity, unmoored in some black ocean that pulled at the edges of his mind. Then came the breath, not his. A hot, wet gust against his ear. He recoiled, arms flailing in the dark. But there was nothing to grab onto. No walls, no floor, no chair, no Mia. Nothing but that breath and the faint sound of lips forming his name again and again, each time in a different voice. Childlike, elderly, screaming, whispering. Then laughter, dry and jagged like teeth grinding stone. He shouted, but his voice didn't echo. It was as if the air ate his words the moment they left his throat. In desperation, he scrambled for the flashlight, sliding across slick stone, hands skimming symbols that buzzed with heat and static under his palms. Then his fingers brushed plastic, the familiar feel of the light, and he snatched it up. It flickered once, twice, then steadied. The basement was gone. No walls, no ceiling, no cavern. He now stood in a long hallway made of crumbling brick, narrow and dripping wet, lit only by the flashlight's beam. The chair where the false Maya had sat was nowhere to be seen, and neither were the hands. He turned in a slow circle, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Was the house shifting around him? Was it all in his head? Or worse, had he never really left the threshold of the front door? He considered turning back, retracing his steps to the exit. But the hallway behind him was sealed off with rusted iron bars, thick and cold to the touch. As he looked closer, he saw carvings etched into each one, names, dozens of names, some he recognized. The missing, the lost, the dead. Then, suddenly, the flashlight beam caught movement at the far end of the hall. A silhouette. Human. Still. Waiting. "Mia," he croaked. The shape didn't move. He stepped forward, slowly, each footfall echoing louder than the last. The hallway narrowed as he walked, and the ceiling sloped lower until it felt like he was being funneled into a throat, swallowed whole by the building. Water dripped in rhythmic beats, and somewhere ahead, something groaned. A long, low creak like old wood bearing weight it couldn't handle. The figure remained still until he was just feet away. Then it shifted, not forward, not backward, but sideways, melting into the wall like smoke. Noah froze. The bricks rippled where the figure had stood, bulging as if something was pressing against them from the other side. Then, silence. Noah didn't want to keep going. Every part of him screamed to run. But he couldn't run back. He was trapped between the names of the dead and the breathing bricks. So he moved forward, into whatever the house had planned for him. The hallway gave way to a room. It was a child's bedroom. Intact. Clean, as if time hadn't touched it. A small bed with frilly pink sheets. Dolls neatly arranged on a shelf. A rocking horse in the corner. A music box on the dresser, its lid open, though no sound played. But everything was wrong. The dolls had no eyes. The rocking horse swayed slowly on its own. The walls were lined with crayon drawings, dozens of them, each more disturbing than the last. One showed a family of 4, 2 parents, a boy, and a girl, all smiling. The next showed the same family, but the smiles had twisted. Their mouths were too wide. The eyes were black holes. By the third drawing, the children were gone. In the fourth, the parents were on fire. And the fifth showed a single figure standing in the doorway of a room, staring at a bed where someone lay sleeping. The figure had no face. He staggered back, heart pounding, bile rising in his throat. This was impossible. He'd never been here before. Never drawn these things. Yet his name was scrawled in a child's handwriting beneath the pictures. He turned to leave, and the door slammed shut behind him. The music box began to play, soft, slow, a lullaby he recognized but couldn't place. Then the bed creaked. He whipped around, raising the flashlight, and saw the shape of someone lying under the covers. Small, still, a child. He stepped closer, each movement a fight against his instincts. The flashlight beam trembled in his grip as he reached the side of the bed and pulled the blanket down. It was a doll, porcelain, dressed like a child, hair styled like Maya's when she was young. Its mouth was stitched shut with black thread. But the worst part was its eyes, real human eyes, staring at him with terror frozen behind glass. No, he whispered. The doll's head turned. Click, its mouth tore open, the threads snapping one by one. It shrieked, a sound not meant to come from anything in this world, and the lights exploded. The music box shrieked with it, playing faster and faster, until it skipped like a broken record. Dolls flew from shelves. The rocking horse bucked violently. The walls bled black from the crayon lines, symbols surfacing beneath the drawings like something trying to claw its way through. Noah ran. He pounded against the door, kicked it, screamed. Something laughed from the bed. The door gave way all at once, and he stumbled into another hallway, not the one he came from, but new, different. Behind him the room sealed shut. This hall was colder, damp stone, dripping pipes above like a dungeon. And far ahead, just before the bend, a flickering red light pulsed. He moved toward it, knowing he had no other path. As he walked, the house whispered. Not words, names. Hundreds of them. Spoken in unison by voices that clawed at the edges of his sanity. Each step felt heavier, like the air was thickening into syrup. But he forced himself forward until he reached the light. It came from a single bulb, swinging above a rusted door marked R-Ohm 12. He pushed it open and walked into his childhood, the kitchen, his family's. Same cracked tiles, same humming fridge, same table with the dent in the corner from where Mia hid it chasing him once. His mother stood at the stove, back to him, humming a tune. His father sat at the table, newspaper in hand. And Mia, little, 7-year-old Mia, sat across from him coloring. Noah, honey, wash your hands. Dinner's almost ready, said his mother. His father didn't look up. How was school? Noah blinked. He couldn't move, couldn't speak. He was a grown man, standing in the memory of a moment that should have faded years ago. But everything was real, tangible. Come sit, Mia said, smiling up at him. I made you something. He stepped forward slowly. As he reached the table, he saw what she'd drawn. It was a picture of the house, but not from outside, from inside, from this room. A figure at the table, another at the stove, one coloring, and one watching from the doorway. A fifth figure stood behind him, tall and dark with red eyes, its hand reaching for his shoulder. He spun around, and there it was. Not a person. Not even a monster. Something worse. Tall, shifting, made of everything he feared. Its face was a blur of screaming mouths and empty eyes, skin like flickering ash. It reached for him, and the room vanished. He fell. Into blackness again. No floor, no light. Just the cold sensation of falling forever. The last thing he heard was Maya's voice, not pleading, not crying, but laughing. Not like herself, but like it. The house, it had her now, and it wanted him too. The fall didn't end with impact. There was no crash, no landing. It ended with stillness, complete and total. One breath Noah was plummeting through that endless black. The next he was standing upright, feet planted on a surface he hadn't felt arrive. No jolt, no warning, just the silent snapping of gravity's spell. For a moment, he thought maybe the house had decided to let him go, cast him out like a piece of gristle it couldn't chew. Maybe the nightmare had exhausted itself. But as his eyes adjusted, he realized he hadn't left the house. He had only sunk deeper. This room was colder than any before. Not just chilled air, but a biting presence, like the temperature had memory, and it remembered death. The walls were smooth concrete, damp to the touch, and the ceiling was barely taller than his head. The only light came from a single dangling bulb, flickering lazily like it was half asleep. And under that weak light stood something impossible, a door. It wasn't the door that caught his attention. It was what was written above it, carved deep into the concrete in cracked, uneven letters. Room 13, the room that wasn't there. His mouth dried instantly. Room 13, the missing floor, the whispered legend. Everyone in Hollow's Edge knew the story. The house had 12 rooms, counted and documented decades ago during the last official inspection, before the town gave up trying to condemn the place. But those who dared map it, ghost hunters, thrill seekers, the occasional drunk with something to prove, claimed that a 13th door always appeared if you stayed long enough. And it never appeared in the same place twice. Noah had always thought it was just more myth, another scare tactic stitched onto the patchwork of legends that kept people away. But now, here it was. A door in front of him, real breathing, humming like it could sense him staring, and his sister's voice was behind it. Noah, not a plea this time, not a cry for help, a greeting. He stepped closer, every instinct in his body screaming. The bulb above flickered faster the nearer he got, casting him in strobe, like flashes that made his reflection in the glossy floor twitch unnaturally. In one flash, his eyes looked hollow. In the next, he was grinning though his face stayed still. In another, he saw something behind him. Tall, wrong, fingers too long. But when he spun around, nothing. Just the door. A handle covered in dark rust, or blood. Maybe both. He reached out. Touched it. Cold. The door didn't creak when it opened. It sighed. Like something old and tired, happy to be disturbed again. Beyond it was a hallway that shouldn't exist. Narrow, lined with mirrors, stretching on far longer than the house should allow. Each mirror reflected the same thing, not Noah, but 1,000 versions of him, each one slightly off, some older, some younger, some bloodied, one with no mouth, another missing his eyes, one crying, one laughing, all staring at him. As he stepped inside, the door behind him vanished. Gone, seamless concrete where it had once been. The mirrors shifted, and suddenly, every reflection moved on its own. Not mimicking. Acting, they began to whisper. Not just to him, but about him. He left her. He forgot. He ran. He lied. He wanted this. Noah turned, trying to block the voices, to find any path forward, but every turn was a dead end. The mirrors grew tighter. The space closed in. And then, without warning, every reflection screamed in unison and shattered. A storm of glass rained down. He shielded his head, but not before a sharp edge slashed across his cheek. Warm blood trailed down his face. And beneath the shards where the mirrors had been were windows. Windows into other rooms. Not in this house, but in memories. He saw his sister's 8th birthday, Mia laughing as cake smeared across her cheeks. Then the hospital room when their mother died, Mia sobbing, Noah stone-faced. Another window showed a moment he'd buried deep their last real fight. Mia begging him not to leave Hollow's Edge. You don't get it, Noah, she had said. You think this town is just rot and ghosts, but it's our home. He'd walked away before she finished. The final window showed something he couldn't look away from. It was Mia, present day. Bound, mouth open in a silent scream. And behind her stood the thing from the kitchen memory. The tall shadow, the shifting face. This time, Noah could make it out more clearly. Its eyes weren't eyes, they were doors. Tiny, revolving, like they led to places not meant for living things. Then the window cracked. Maya turned to look at him. Not a vision, not a memory. She looked straight at him through the window. Noah, she said, you need to choose. The window shattered, and the room melted away, He was standing in a field now, grass tall around him. Night sky above, but the stars were all wrong, moving, twitching, rearranging themselves in unnatural patterns. The moon was a hole leaking black smoke. In front of him were 3 doors standing upright in the dirt. No frames, no walls, just doors. Each one had a symbol. One bore the outline of a heart, cracked down the center. The second, an eye, bleeding. The third, a simple house, but upside down. A voice behind him said, "One leads to Mia. One leads to you. One leads to it." He turned, but the voice had no source. "What happens if I choose wrong?" he asked aloud. The sky answered with a peal of thunder that sounded like laughter. Noah stared at the doors. Heart. Eye. House. He thought of what he saw, her pain. His guilt, the house's hunger. He couldn't think logically. This wasn't a puzzle. It was a punishment. He picked the door with the eye. The one bleeding. It opened into light, and then into flame. Fire danced along the walls of a wooden corridor, licking up toward the ceiling. A bedroom at the end, Maya's childhood room, fully ablaze. Her voice screamed from within. Noah ran. The fire didn't burn him, not at first. But the heat pressed against his chest like a hand trying to crush his heart. He reached the room, kicked open the door. Mia was there. Not bound, not screaming. Just standing in the middle of the fire, untouched, tears streaking her face. "I told you not to come back," she whispered. "It feeds on regret." The walls collapsed inward. Noah lunged forward, grabbed her hand, and everything went black. When he opened his eyes again, he was in the first room, the entryway. Except now the door was gone. The windows too, just walls, solid, and Mia beside him, breathing, watching. "You brought it with you," she said. Then she smiled, and her eyes turned to mirrors. Noah didn't blink, didn't breathe, didn't dare speak. He just stared at Mia's face, familiar and wrong all at once. Her expression was calm, too calm. Like someone waiting for him to catch up to something he didn't want to see. The same little sister he had sworn to protect was standing right beside him in the entryway of the house that had eaten them. Both whole. But the girl looking back at him wasn't Mia. Not completely. Her eyes had turned into mirrors. Small, smooth surfaces that shimmered like wet glass. And inside them, he didn't see himself. He saw the house, from the outside, burning, rebuilding, breathing. He saw others, figures in shadow, walking through it over and over again, never noticing the rooms changing around them. Then he saw Mia, countless versions of her, in different clothes, different ages, different rooms, all crying, all silent, all watching. "Mia," he croaked. What happened to you?" She tilted her head slowly, her mirror, eyes never blinking. "I was here too long. It remembered me." "What do you mean remembered?" he asked, though part of him already knew. "The house doesn't forget," she said, as if reciting something. "It doesn't just trap you. It studies you. And then it makes more of you. So you never leave." She took a step forward. Her voice was still hers, but it carried something under it now, like another person was whispering every word with her in perfect unison. "I've been you, Noah, and you've been me. In the mirrors, in the rooms, in the dark. We've both been here before. You just don't remember." His knees weakened, a deep nausea crawling up his spine. "That's not possible. I only just got here. I came for you." Her smile flickered. Not a kind smile. Not even a sad one. Something worse. "That's what you always think." And suddenly he did remember. A flicker. A flash. A memory not from his life, but from the house's. He saw himself walking into the house before. Again. And again. Different nights. Different clothes. Sometimes with others. Sometimes alone. Sometimes with Mia. But always ending the same. The door closing behind him. The light dying. The voices starting. The walls remembering. Noah fell to the floor, clutching his head, trying to squeeze out whatever this place was doing to his thoughts. "No, no, I've never been here before." "I couldn't have been. I would remember." Maya knelt beside him. Her voice softened, but her eyes stayed cold and still. You always say that. But you don't remember because the house lets you forget. Until it doesn't. He looked up at her, fear clawing through his throat. Why me? Why us? She paused. Because you're unfinished. Noah didn't understand, but the house did. Without warning, the walls groaned. The floor shifted beneath them. And then the entire room breathed in. The ceiling stretched upward like elastic, the walls bending inward, wood groaning with pressure. The light above them burst, showering the floor in sparks. In the sudden dark, Maya's outline shimmered. And for just a second, he saw the thing beneath her skin. Not a monster, not a ghost, something worse, a copy. Like a wax sculpture of her soul, melted and reshaped by memory. He scrambled backward. Mia? If that's even really you. What the hell am I supposed to do? She stood slowly. You're not supposed to do anything. You're supposed to break. And then the floor split. Noah dropped. He hit cold tile, skidding into another room. Except this one was different. Too clean. Too white. The walls were tiled from floor to ceiling. Harsh fluorescent lights buzzed above. Stainless steel tables lined the perimeter, each with something covered in white sheets. A morgue. No tags. No charts. Just quiet. The silence was surgical. He stood slowly, heart hammering, knowing without knowing that each of those sheets was hiding a version of him. Or worse. People he'd failed. People he didn't even remember failing. One of the sheets twitched. Another fell away, revealing an arm pale. Familiar. He stepped closer, fingers trembling. It was Mia. This time, truly her. No mirror eyes, no shadow face. Just her still and cold. No, he whispered. No. The lights above him exploded one by one, plunging the room into stuttering flashes. In each pulse, the body on the table shifted. Her head turning, her mouth parting. A breath. A twitch. A scream that didn't reach the air. He stumbled back, slamming into the door. But it was gone. The room sealed around him, and then he heard footsteps. Not one pair. Many. Hundreds. Coming closer. He turned slowly. Tables were empty now. Sheets on the floor. The dead were standing. All of them Mia. All different. Each one stepped forward in sync, voices overlapping in perfect, unbearable harmony. We needed you to come back. We needed you to see. To see what? He begged. The room shattered around him. He was somewhere new. The attic. Dust swirled in thick shafts of moonlight pouring through a circular window. Cobwebs clung to the rafters. Boxes towered like forgotten memories. In the center, a single chair. And someone in it. Noah stepped forward, slow, terrified. It was himself, eyes open, staring, lips moving, whispering something again and again. He leaned close to hear. I never left. I never left. I never left. Noah touched his own shoulder, and his copy rotted. Skin sloughed off in strips, eyes rolled back, flesh shriveled, until it was a skeleton in a chair, jaw hanging open in silent laughter. Then the window burst. Wind howled in, carrying voices, dozens of them. Maya's. His own. Strangers. All saying the same thing. Wake up. He blinked. And he was back in the basement. The chair was empty. The walls were whispering. Footsteps above him. The front door opening. Had he dreamed it? Had he never moved? Noah stood, chest heaving, sweat soaking his shirt. He looked around the basement. Stone walls. A single staircase. No symbols. No fire. Had it all been a hallucination? Then he saw it, on the floor, beside his foot. A small, porcelain doll. Maya's face. Eyes sewn shut. Smiling. The house hadn't finished with him. Not even close. The porcelain doll didn't move. It didn't blink. It didn't speak. But it watched him. Eyes sewn shut, mouth painted in a grotesque grin, and face shaped exactly like Mia's. Noah stared at it, frozen in a kind of mental paralysis, as though even bending to pick it up would mean inviting something unspeakable into his hands. It sat perfectly in the middle of the basement floor, in the very spot where he remembered seeing the fake Mia tied to the chair. Only now, there was no chair, no symbols, no red glow, just the doll and the steady, creeping sound of something walking above him. He stood still for a long time, listening, The footsteps above weren't frantic or heavy. They were soft, careful, like someone trying not to wake a sleeping house. But it was the rhythm that twisted his stomach. It didn't match the pacing of one person. The steps paused, then were followed by a second set, slower, as if whatever it was had more than two legs. Noah finally tore his eyes from the doll and crept toward the staircase. Every step felt like betrayal. His joints creaked, his breath came too loud. The wood beneath his shoes whispered secrets to the air. As he reached the top stair, he pressed his ear to the door. Nothing, no movement, no breath, just silence. He pushed it open. The hallway on the other side was wrong again. Not because it had changed, that much was expected by now, but because it was familiar. Painfully familiar. The same hallway from his childhood home. The dent in the drywall where he'd thrown a toy at Mia when they were fighting. The old coat rack they never used. Even the same soft buzz from the hallway light that always flickered but never went out. His heart twisted in his chest. This couldn't be real, couldn't be here. But the scent, that was what finally undid him. That faint mix of lemon cleaner and his mother's perfume. So gentle, so cruel. Noah stepped forward slowly. Every detail was perfect. His family photos lined the wall, except each one had been altered. His parents' faces were gone. Not blurred, not scratched. Gone. Clean ovals of empty flesh where eyes and mouth should be. Only he and Mia remained in every photo, standing side by side, their younger selves smiling without knowing what would one day come. He reached out to one frame, fingers trembling, and touched the glass. It was cold. Too cold. The glass cracked beneath his touch. And then the laughter began. High, pitched, childlike. From the far end of the hall, he turned. There stood a little girl in a red dress. Hair like Maya's, but too long. Face shadowed. She held something in her hand. A small object swinging lazily from her fingers. The doll. Noah took a step back. "Who are you?" he asked. The girl tilted her head. "Don't you remember me?" Her voice wasn't a child's. It was layered, like multiple voices speaking through her, some male, some female, some not human at all. The doll slipped from her hand and hit the floor with a soft crack. It didn't break. It rolled to Noah's feet and stopped upright, watching. "You were supposed to stay in room 13, the girl said. "You're not allowed here." "This is my house," Noah whispered. "No," she said, stepping closer. "This is the house's memory of your house. And now that you're in it, it can remember you better." The hallway stretched behind her. Lights began to pop, one by one, as though being devoured. A wind blew from nowhere, carrying whispers in his voice. Things he'd said long ago. In anger, in guilt, in fear. "I'm not going back," he said firmly. The girl smiled. "You never left." And then the hallway pulled itself apart. Not exploded. Not collapsed. It stretched as if the floor and ceiling were elastic, yanking the walls into endless corridors. The girl vanished in the distance. Doors appeared on either side, dozens of them, each one labeled with a year. He moved toward the most recent one, his chest tight. The door marked 2025 pulsed softly like a heartbeat. He opened it and stepped into memory. It was his apartment in the city. Clean, cold, lonely. The same furniture, same flickering television screen, except he wasn't alone. Across the room, a version of himself sat on the couch, slumped, face buried in his hands. The room was filled with silence so loud it screamed. He remembered this night. The night he got the call about Mia going missing. The night he'd stared at his phone for 2 hours before calling their parents back. The night he almost didn't come back. The version of him on the couch raised his head, and for the first time, Noah looked into his own eyes and saw what Maya must have seen. Detachment. Distance. A man already halfway gone. "You didn't believe her," the other Noah said. "I didn't know," he replied. "You didn't care." That hit harder. Because maybe, just maybe, it wasn't entirely wrong. "I came for her," he said. "You came to forgive yourself," the other said. "Not to save her." She called. She begged. You ignored. And now the house has her. The room darkened. The television shut off, the windows fogged with black. The other Noah stood, but something shifted. His skin twitched. His face melted. He smiled too wide. Guess what? He whispered. She's been here longer than you know. She's become part of it. And so will you. Noah ran. Back through the hallway, past the doors, past the mirrors now forming along the walls. Each mirror held a different version of him. Twisting, breaking, screaming, laughing. One hung himself. One clawed at his face. One sank into water. All of them stared at him as he passed. He skidded to a stop when the hallway opened into a cavernous room, something between a library and a mausoleum. Endless rows of shelves towered above, but instead of books, each shelf held jars. Inside the jars, teeth, ice, fingers, locks of hair, all labeled, all cataloged. He found one with his name. Inside, his voice. Trapped in swirling shadow. He screamed and the jar shook. "This is the collector's room," a voice said from above. Noah looked up, saw it. The shape. The tall, flickering shadow, thing that had appeared before. The house's avatar. Its memory given shape. The collector. It hovered, not touching the ground, arms too long, face shifting with every blink. "You've been through the rooms," it said. "You've tasted the walls. You've offered your grief. All that remains is one thing." It floated downward, inches from him. "Will you give your memory of her?" Noah stepped back. "What? If you give your memory of Maya," the collector said, "you can leave. You'll live. But you won't know why you're alone. You won't remember her screams, her smile, her scent. She will be gone. You will be safe." He stared at it, trembling. "And if I don't?" The collector's voice turned quiet. "You'll stay. You'll remember forever. And you'll feed us." A second door appeared behind the collector. One marked Far Eat. Another marked Rem BR. Noah stood there for a long time, heart pounding. He took a step forward, and chose. Noah stared at the two doors like they were alive. They didn't creak or swing or whisper, but they pulsed faintly, like lungs under a paper, thin layer of skin. Favarjet hummed with a quiet warmth, inviting, almost kind. It promised peace, sleep, a blank slate. Rama MBR, on the other hand, gave off a cold draft that stung his face like frostbite. That door didn't make promises. It made threats. Behind him, the collector hovered in silence, a silhouette of shifting ash and regret. It didn't speak again. It didn't have to. Noah could feel the choice, squeezing tighter and tighter around his chest, the way nightmares do when you realize you're still dreaming and can't wake up. Could he really erase her? Mia, his sister. The girl who'd tied bows on his sneakers to keep him from running too fast. The teenager who used to sneak into his room when thunderstorms made her too scared to sleep. The one he ignored when she said something was wrong in Hollow's Edge. The one he came back for, too late. But if he remembered, the collector warned he'd feed the house. He'd be another thread in its web. Another echo in its walls. He stepped toward the Farjet door. The warmth grew stronger, washing over him like a lullaby. His legs stopped shaking. His heart slowed. He could feel it, the gentle tug of release. He could walk through and never remember the screams. Never carry the weight. No more guilt, just silence. He reached for the handle and paused. It wasn't the house that stopped him. It wasn't fear. It was something simpler. It was the sound of Maya's laughter, real laughter. Not distorted, not layered, not tainted. Just a memory, pure and bright, flickering in his mind like a candle refusing to go out. He remembered the day she got her first bike. He'd been annoyed, forced to help teach her. But after she finally balanced without help, she turned to him and screamed, "I'm flying!" Her smile stretched across her whole face, hair tangled in the wind, sunlight bouncing off her cheeks. He hadn't thought about that moment in years. Maybe even forgotten it entirely, until now. Noah pulled his hand away from the Farji door. He turned to the cold one, Rami MBR. The moment he laid his fingers on the handle, the door screamed. Not from its hinges, but from within, as if something behind it didn't want to be let out. The collector stirred for the first time, a low groan rippling through its form like steam passing through broken glass. "You choose pain," it said. "I choose her," Noah replied, and he pulled the door open. The room on the other side was not a room. It was everything. It was before. He was standing in a hospital hallway. The lights above buzzed. The walls were sterile. The scent of antiseptic clawed at his throat. And ahead of him, just down the corridor, was a small window showing a delivery room. Inside, his mother was holding a newborn. His father stood beside her, younger than Noah had ever remembered seeing him. And there, curled in a pink blanket, blinking up at the world for the first time, was Mia. Noah stepped closer to the glass. A voice whispered in his ear every memory, from the start. That's the price. He tried to move, but the floor turned to water. The walls bled into images. Now he was 8, Mia 4. They were in the backyard. She'd just fallen and skinned her knee. She was crying. He walked away. Their mother had yelled at him.
"She's just a baby, Noah!"
He'd felt ashamed, but never said sorry. Then 12, Mia 8. They were sitting in their treehouse. She told him she saw something in the woods, something that watched. He'd laughed, teased her for being scared. 16, Mia 12. She'd started hearing things in her room. Night voices, scratching behind the walls. He told her it was the pipes. She'd stopped asking for help after that. 18. The night he left Hollow's Edge, she stood in the driveway, clutching a gift. He didn't even open it, just told her he had to leave. She never hugged him goodbye. 25. The last voicemail she ever left. "Noah, if something happens to me, don't come back. Please, it's too late for me. Just remember me the way I was, okay, when we were little." Before the house started changing things, he'd ignored it. Came back anyway. Now he was back in the collector's room, on his knees, weeping. He looked up. The doors were gone. The shelves were empty. The collector stood directly above him, not angry, not threatening. It knelt. For the first time, Noah saw its face. It was Maya's, but older, worn. Like time had passed inside the walls of the house, even when it hadn't in the real world. She looked tired, weathered by memory. "You're not the house," Noah whispered. "You're her." She smiled. Not the twisted one from before, a soft, knowing one. "I remembered everything. And I became this. Then why did you ask me to forget? Because remembering hurts. And I didn't want you to fade into it the way I did." Noah reached out, touched her cheek. "I'd rather hurt with you than forget you." The collector, Mia, closed her eyes, and for a brief, aching second, the house shuddered, like a great ancient beast waking from a centuries-long sleep. The walls cracked. The air grew thin. Mia whispered, "Then hold on," and the floor collapsed, not into darkness, but light, blinding, burning, cleansing. Noah screamed, not from pain, but from the sheer force of the memory flooding into him all at once. Every room, every face, every scream, every goodbye. The people the house had taken, the stories it had rewritten, the truths it buried beneath warped floors and whispering wallpaper. He felt it all, and then, silence. He woke up in a hospital bed, white ceiling tiles, machines beeping softly, sunlight pouring in through a window. Beside him sat a nurse, clipboard in hand. "You're awake," she said, smiling. He blinked. Where am I?" "You were found unconscious on Renfield Road," she said, "just outside the old Hollow house. Locals say that place is cursed." He sat up slowly. Everything felt real. The sheet, the light, his breath. But something was missing. "Mia," he said. "Where's Mia?" The nurse frowned. "I'm sorry. But you came in alone." Noah's heart dropped.
"No, she was with me,
But then he stopped. On the side table beside his bed sat a porcelain doll, its eyes wide, mouth painted in a tiny, perfect smile, and its hand held a folded note. He picked it up. Inside, in familiar handwriting, it said, "You chose to remember. So remember this, I never left. And neither did you. Love, Mia." Noah stared at the note, hands trembling, breath stuck somewhere between a gasp and a scream. His pulse thundered in his ears. The porcelain doll didn't move. It didn't need to. Its presence alone was a ticking clock. A reminder that time wasn't what it seemed. That reality was as soft as wet paper when the house got hold of you. The handwriting on the note was unmistakable. Maya's. It wasn't just similar. It was hers. The way she looped her Y, the little heart she always drew at the end of her name. The words danced in front of his eyes, burning themselves into his memory. You chose to remember. So remember this, I never left, and neither did you. He looked around the hospital room again, and something began to itch at the back of his skull. Everything was just a little too perfect. The white walls didn't have any smudges. The floors didn't squeak. The air smelled like nothing at all. No bleach, no disinfectant, no human scent. There were no nurses rushing in the hallway, no announcements over the intercom, just quiet. Dead quiet. Noah sat up. The IV in his arm tugged slightly. But when he looked down at the tube, it wasn't attached to anything. The bag above him was empty. Dry. Had it ever been full? His heart began to race. He swung his legs over the edge of the bed and stood, the tile cold beneath his bare feet. Outside the room's window, he saw trees. Hills. Fog drifting lazily over a familiar landscape. But not a single car passed. Not a bird moved. And when he tried to open the window, his hand passed through the handle. The illusion shattered. The beeping machines flatlined in an instant. The sunlight flickered like a faulty light bulb. The nurse was gone. Her clipboard sat in the chair, half melted into the cushion like it had been painted on. He stumbled back, nearly tripping over the doll still perched on the table. And then the walls started to breathe. Inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale. The wallpaper peeled back in strips, revealing more than brick or plaster. Behind it was darkness, a void that pulsed with memory. Whispers rose from inside the wall like trapped breath. Names, places, moments he didn't know he'd forgotten. Mia's voice echoing in a loop. You chose to remember. You chose to stay. No, he muttered, backing up. Voice shaking. No, this isn't real. This can't be real. But then he turned and saw the door to his hospital room had changed. It wasn't a hospital door anymore. It was wood, old, painted black. The numbers carved into it read, ROM0. His mouth went dry. He didn't know why, but something about that number chilled him more than anything else so far. Room 13 was supposed to be the forbidden one. The one that moved, the one that ate the others. But this, Room Zo, was a beginning, or maybe a reset. Maybe this was where it all started, or where it started over. He had no choice. He walked to the door and opened it. Inside was a long, circular chamber, dimly lit by flickering gas lamps mounted on stone columns. The ceiling stretched endlessly above into shadows. The floor was etched with symbols. Some he remembered from the basement, others that shifted as he looked at them. In the center of the room stood a mirror, but not just any mirror. It was oval, tall, framed in rusted iron that looked like it had grown from the floor itself. And the glass didn't show his reflection. It showed the house, all of it, from above, from inside, from behind the walls. The house alive, veins pulsing through its floors, eyes opening in its closets, teeth behind every locked door. Rooms growing like cancer, hallways looping into themselves, doors that led nowhere and others that led to the beginning of someone else's memory. Then the mirror spoke. Not in sound, but in thought. The words didn't pass through his ears. They arrived inside him. You never left, it said. You were born here, you lived here. You died here. No, he whispered. That's not true. The mirror showed him a crib, a baby crying. The room was unfamiliar at first, until he saw the wallpaper. Yellow stars, faded moons, his nursery. Inside the house, he saw himself grow up within its walls. The front porch he thought belonged to his family home. The bedroom he assumed was his childhood room. But every piece had belonged to this house all along. It had built itself around his memories. It hadn't taken them. It had been them. You and your sister, the mirror said, were born from memory. The town made you. The fear made you. And when they stopped speaking of the house, it made sure you stayed. He fell to his knees, nausea rising, tears burning down his cheeks. His voice cracked when he said her name. Maya. The mirror shifted. It showed her. She was standing in another room, room 8, by the markings on the wall, looking directly at him through another mirror. Her eyes were no longer glass. They were real. Human. Wide with fear. Noah, she said. It's waking up again. It's trying to spread. What do I do? He begged. How do I end it? You can't, she said. But you can stop remembering. That's what it feeds on. Memory. Guilt. Echoes. You have to let me go. No, he shook his head violently. No, I came for you. I chose to remember. And now it remembers you, she said softly. He stood, reached toward her. Their fingers almost touched through the mirror. But then her image began to blur, melt, pull backward. The house was reclaiming her. Noah, she said one last time, don't remember me. Don't let me live in here with you. Let me die. Let me out. And she was gone. The mirror shattered. A wave of sound hit him. Every scream, every cry, every creaking board, every door slamming, all at once. The floor buckled. The walls peeled open like rotting fruit. The house was collapsing, or evolving, or being born again. And at the center of it all was a staircase. Descending, a voice whispered in his mind, Room 1. A room below the beginning, where memories become flesh, where regret is sculpted into corridors, where people like him are built. Noah stood at the edge of the stairs. He could go down, or he could close his eyes. Forget, pretend none of it happened. Let Mia go, let himself go. But he took the first step, because something worse was waiting. And it wasn't in the house. It was in him. The stairs descended forever. Not in the way tunnels stretch long into the dark, but in the way dreams feel bottomless, endless. Like gravity has made a deal with something older than time, and is now pulling you into the very idea of down. Noah had lost track of how many steps he'd taken. Hundreds, maybe thousands. Yet his legs didn't tire. His breath never ran short. The air didn't change. No dust, no mold, no cold stone, just an unnatural stillness. As if he was walking through the throat of something ancient that had learned to hold its breath. And then, suddenly, he reached the bottom. It wasn't a floor, it was flesh, soft, pulsing, warm. He froze, eyes wide. The surface beneath his feet undulated gently, like skin stretched over something breathing just beneath. He stared, trying to convince himself it was some trick of his senses, some hallucination born from everything he'd seen. But then the floor inhaled. A long, slow rise, then a shuddering fall. The room around him blinked to life. Walls unfolded from the shadows, stretching tall and wet, lined with veins that pulsed in slow rhythm. Not made of wood or brick or stone, but tissue. The ceiling above throbbed like a heartbeat. And worst of all, it wasn't completely dark. It glowed faintly with a reddish hue, as if lit from within by something buried deep in the house's flesh. Like the house wasn't just alive, it was wumming something. Noah stood frozen, unable to breathe properly. Every part of his mind screamed at him to turn around, to climb back up the stairs, and forget he'd ever seen this place. But when he turned, the staircase was gone. Replaced by a smooth wall of pulsing red, the house had sealed him in. He wasn't in a room anymore. He was inside the house. Not metaphorically. Literally, it had digested him. A sound echoed through the space, a low, squelching groan, as if something massive was shifting within the walls. Then came the voices, soft at first, then clearer. Dozens, hundreds. Some whispered his name. Some screamed it. Some sang it. He spun in circles, trying to find the source. Faces began pressing through the walls, faces he recognized. The missing, the lost, the people the house had taken. Their mouths opened in silent agony. Their eyes rolled in endless loops, never blinking, never breaking contact. Mia, he whispered. Where are you? The room answered by parting its wall. A vertical slit opened, leaking a thick, clear fluid that smelled like rust and ash. Noah recoiled, covering his mouth, but his feet moved on their own. The floor beneath him guided him forward, gently, like a conveyor belt. The passage widened as he walked through it. Every step squelched. At the end, he found her. Not Mia as he'd last seen her, but something becoming Mia. She hung suspended in the center of a cocoon, like chamber. Threads of red tissue clung to her arms, her legs, her chest. Her face was bare, eyes open, mouth parted like she was mid-sentence. But no sound came. She didn't move. Her body looked half-formed, her skin smooth in some places, raw in others, like she was being rewritten. Noah rushed forward, slipping once on the slick floor, catching himself, just before he fell into a puddle of thick fluid that bubbled with strange, whispering syllables. He reached for her, but the moment his hands touched the threads binding her, they pulled tighter. The chamber shivered. Mia blinked. Once, slowly. Her lips moved. "Noah, you're not supposed to be here." He stepped back, eyes brimming with tears. "I came for you." Her head tilted weakly. "You came again." He froze. "What do you mean again?" She exhaled. The threads around her pulsed in time with her breath. "You always come back. You always forget. And then you always find your way down here, because the house needs you to." He shook his head violently. No, I broke the cycle. I chose to remember." Mia looked at him with eyes full of both sorrow and resignation. "That's what the house wants you to believe. Every time, it makes you choose. Forget or remember. It doesn't matter. Either way you feed it." He staggered back. "That's not true." The walls around him groaned in agreement. The chamber's shape began to change. It curved inward, walls tightening. The ceiling dropped. The air thickened with the stench of memory gone rotten. Maya's voice echoed again, stronger now. "It's not just a house, Noah. It's a repeating memory, an echo of every broken promise. Every door we didn't open. Every voice we ignored. And it builds itself out of us. Out of our pain. Out of our guilt." She began to descend slowly, the threads releasing her inch by inch, as if the house was done digesting her. Her feet touched the floor, but she didn't fall. She stood upright, breathing hard, her skin glowing faintly beneath the tissue still clinging to her. "Then how do we kill it?" Noah asked. "Tell me. There has to be a way." She looked at him. And then she smiled. Not a twisted, eerie smile. A real one. The kind he remembered from before the nightmares. Before the house. Before the memory. "You don't kill it," she said. "You starve it." He frowned. "How?" She stepped forward and touched his chest. Her hand was cold, but it grounded him in a way nothing had since he'd arrived. "We stop feeding it," she whispered. "No fear, no guilt, no memory. We leave it empty. But we can't forget," he replied. "We tried. It just resets everything." Maya looked past him now. At the walls. At the veins. At the floor. "We don't forget," she said. "We accept." And then she began to speak, not to him. To the house. "I remember what happened in the attic," she said softly. "I remember the whispering under my bed. The voice that mimicked Mom's. The way Dad's face wasn't quite right after that night. I remember you feeding on all of it. The walls around them writhed. Faces screamed through the tissue. I remember running to Noah, and I remember him leaving. I remember hating him for it. I remember loving him anyway." The house shuddered. Noah understood. He stepped beside her. "I remember ignoring the signs," he said. "I remember thinking it was just a story. I remember being too late. I remember wishing I could go back. But I can't. And that's okay." A sound rippled through the chamber. Something cracked. A deep, splitting fracture. The walls split open, not violently, but like something giving up. The floor went still. The lights dimmed. The breath of the houses stopped. And then, silence. Real silence. No whispers, no groans, no heartbeat. The houses went still. Mia turned to him. "You feel that?" He nodded. "It's hungry." "No," she said. "It's starving." The flesh under their feet began to dry, flaking into dust. The red glow faded. The tissue thinned to cracked plaster. Stone returned to the walls. The cocoon doorways collapsed. Noah looked around. What now? Mia took his hand. We walk out. Can we? She looked him in the eyes. We always could. We just didn't believe it. They walked. No door appeared. No hallway stretched. They simply walked. Forward, until forward became light. Not white, searing light. Sunlight. They stepped into the morning, onto Renfield Road. The house behind them was gone. No wood, no roof, no porch. Just dirt, just silence, just peace. Maya squeezed his hand. Next time, she said. We won't forget. He smiled. No. Next time, there won't be a next time. And for the first time in a very long time, the house didn't answer. The dirt where the house once stood looked undisturbed, like nothing had ever existed there at all. No debris. No foundation. Not even a dent in the earth where the porch used to sag under its own weight. Just a flat, quiet patch of soil, framed by overgrown grass and trees that leaned away slightly, like even nature didn't want to get too close. The sky was too blue, the birdsong too perfect. For a moment, Noah almost believed it was over. That they'd done it. That whatever it had been, the house, the memory, the loop, had finally broken. He looked over at Mia. She stood motionless, eyes scanning the empty lot, face unreadable. Her skin had regained its color, her breathing was calm, but something behind her eyes hadn't left the basement, or room 13, or room 0. Do you feel it? She asked suddenly. Noah blinked. Feel what? She didn't answer right away. Her hand drifted toward her chest, fingertips brushing the collar of her shirt, as if checking for something just beneath the skin. The hum, she said finally. It's quieter now, but it's still there, isn't it? He hadn't noticed it until she said it. But she was right. There was a vibration in the air, barely there, like the leftover ring of a bell long silenced. Not a sound exactly, but a presence. A tension just under the surface, like static clinging to his bones. Maybe it's just our nerves, he offered. Mia gave him a sad smile. Maybe. Or maybe it's like a cut that didn't heal right. You can cover it up, but if you press just the right way, it bleeds again. They stood there in silence for a long time. The breeze picked up, rustling the trees and sweeping dust across the lot. Noah watched it swirl, then vanish. For a second, he swore the dust moved with intention, like it remembered how to form walls, stairs, a door. Let's go, he said, trying to push the feeling down. It's done. We don't owe it any more of our time. They walked. The neighborhood was just waking up. Sprinklers ticking on. Cars pulling out of driveways. Someone walking a dog across the street gave them a polite nod. No one screamed. No one stared. To them, Noah and Mia were just two people taking a morning stroll. Nothing out of place. But the world was out of place. They passed the gas station where they used to buy candy after school. It was boarded up now. Graffiti covered the windows, scrawled with symbols that made Noah's stomach twist. Not words, marks. Ones he'd seen etched into the walls of room 1. He pointed. Did you? Mia nodded. I see them. They kept walking. Down past the elementary school. Its front sign was cracked. Letters rearranged by vandals into nonsense. But there, in the corner of the playground fence, another doll. Porcelain. Identical to the one Noah found in the hospital. Same stitched mouth. Same dead eyes. Noah picked up the pace. By the time they reached their parents' house, the sun was high enough to cast long shadows across the front lawn. The house looked the same, green paint peeling from the trim, wind chimes clinking softly under the porch eave. Familiar, safe, but neither of them moved to go inside. Do you remember what the doctor said? Mia asked. When we visited Mom the last time. Noah turned. About the dementia, she nodded. He said that sometimes the brain creates houses inside itself, rooms where memories live. And when the disease takes hold, those rooms get locked. Lights go out. People get trapped in hallways trying to find something they've already lost. Noah stared at the house. Are you saying we were inside someone's mind? I don't know, she whispered. Maybe. Or maybe we are the memory. Maybe we're what got locked away. Before he could respond, the front door creaked open. Noah's heart stopped. Standing in the doorway was their mother, not as she'd looked near the end, thin, pale, confused, but young, radiant. Hair pinned up like she used to wear it when they were kids. She smiled at them with the warmth of a summer day. "Breakfast is ready," she said. "Come inside." Mia didn't move. Noah stepped forward. "Mom." She tilted her head, of course. "Who else would I be?" He turned to Mia. "Is this real?" "I don't think it matters," she said. "Either we walk in and pretend, or we turn away and carry this forever." The wind shifted. Behind them, they heard a familiar creak, wood stretching under pressure. They turned. In the middle of the empty street, the house had returned. Just for a moment, porch sagging, windows boarded. Door cracked open like a mouth ready to speak. Then, blink, it was gone. Noah clenched his fists. "It followed us." "No," Mia said, voice shaking. "It is us." He looked at her. Her eyes shimmered, not with fear, but with knowing. She understood something now that he didn't yet. A piece of the puzzle he hadn't seen. "Every time someone remembers it," she said, "a door opens somewhere. A mirror breaks. A voice calls out, and it grows again. Not in the same place, not in the same shape, but it grows." Noah turned back toward the house, their childhood home. Their mother was still in the doorway, waiting. Patient, not moving. "She's not real," he said. "No," Maya replied. "But maybe we can be. If we stay, if we forget." "Forget?" She nodded. "Not like the house wants us to. Not erased, not denied, but let go. Leave the memory where it belongs. Not locked in a room, not hidden. Just let it be past." Noah stepped back. "And if we can't?" Maya's voice dropped to a whisper. "Then one day, we'll open the front door of our own house up and find the wrong hallway waiting on the other side." They stood in silence. The breeze carried with it the faint sound of laughter, not children, but echoes. Always behind, never ahead. Noah reached for her hand. "Then let's not open any more doors." Maya nodded. They turned their backs on the street, on the memory, on the echo. And the house, wherever it was now, watched them go. They weren't the last ones to see it. Noah and Maya might have walked away, might have buried the memory beneath layers of silence and sunlight, pretending the past was safely locked behind doors they'd never open again. But the house, if it could even still be called that, was never about just them. It was a pattern, a shape, a wound that healed just enough to split open again when someone touched it the wrong way. And someone always did. 2 towns over, in a thrift store nobody ever really cleaned, a little boy named Ellis picked up a porcelain doll from the bottom of a cardboard bin marked 2015. It had a fine crack down its face, eyes wide and glassy, mouth stitched shut with black thread that looked like human hair. He held it up to the light and smiled. The cashier didn't remember seeing anyone donate it. When Ellis's mother asked where he found it, he said, "She was waiting for me. They took it home." That night, Ellis didn't sleep. His mother heard him talking in the dark, whispering to someone who never answered, at least not with words, just the sound of breathing, wet, close. And when she asked him the next morning who he was talking to, he said, "The girl in the wall." She laughed it off. But later that week, she started forgetting things, where she put her keys, whether she locked the doors, whether Ellis had gone to school or not. Sometimes she'd find herself standing in rooms she didn't remember walking into, staring at reflections that didn't quite match her movements. And the doll always ended up in places she didn't leave it, perched on the edge of the bathtub, sitting upright in the middle of her bed, lying by the front door, one glass eye pointed at the crack beneath the threshold, as if it were listening. One night, she finally had the dream. It was always the same when it started to take hold. She was walking down a hallway that shouldn't have existed in her small one-story house. The air was thick, too warm. The wallpaper peeled in strips that looked like skin. Doors lined the corridor, each one slightly ajar, whispering in voices that sounded like her husband, her son, her own mother. She never opened them. She just kept walking until she reached a staircase that spiraled downward, endlessly into something that hummed. When she woke up, Ellis was gone. The front door stood wide open. His shoes were still by the mat, his bed still warm. The only thing missing was the doll. The police searched for days. Helicopters, dogs, posters stapled to poles. People whispered that the mother had done something. Killed him, hid the body. There was no sign of forced entry. No footprints. Nothing. Just the sound of wind that never stopped rustling the leaves outside their home. When Noah saw the news, his hands trembled. He and Mia were sitting on the porch of a rental cabin they'd moved into on the edge of nowhere. No cell reception, no neighbors. Just trees and time and the soft crackle of the fireplace. It was supposed to be far enough from everything, a place to start over, but even here, the story found them. Ellis Harmon, age 7, last seen outside his home in Corbin Hollow. Police say the door was left open. No sign of a struggle. Noah turned to Mia. She didn't need to speak. Her face said everything. "It's starting again," he whispered. "No," she replied. "It never stopped. We just stepped off the path." He closed his laptop. "What do we do?" he asked. She didn't answer. Because there was nothing to do. The memory had moved on. It had found someone else. A new hallway, a new door, a new echo. And trying to chase it, stop it, destroy it. That was how it pulled you back in. That was how it fed. But that night, Noah couldn't sleep. Because in the corner of their rented cabin, beside the dresser, sitting on the floor, as if it had always been there, was a single, perfect, porcelain doll. It stared up at him with wide, waiting eyes. And across its mouth, a single black thread stretched tight. He didn't tell Mia. He just wrapped it in a towel, walked deep into the woods and buried it. 6 feet down. He didn't mark the spot. Didn't speak. Didn't look back. But as he walked away, he heard something rise from beneath the earth. Not a sound, a breath. And then, louder, soft, close. The first time Ellis spoke to the wall, it answered. Not with words, at least not the kind grown ups understood, but with something slower, deeper. A rumble. A whisper that buzzed beneath the paint, tickling his bones and curling the edges of his dreams. It started 2 nights after the doll came home with him. His mother had set it on a shelf above his dresser, but when he woke up, it was in his bed, arms folded. Face cracked just slightly at the chin. He didn't scream, didn't tell her. He just placed it back where it came from and stared at the wall behind his headboard and whispered, "I know you're in there." The wall hummed. Soft. Curious. It liked being seen. Each night after, he told it stories. Things he didn't tell his mother. About the boy who bullied him at school. About the dreams of long halls and echoing footsteps. About the feeling he got sometimes, like he was walking through memories that didn't belong to him. He would wake up remembering things that hadn't happened. A swing set that never stood in their backyard. A girl with stitches in her mouth. A hallway behind the closet that shouldn't exist, but felt realer than sunlight. The wall always listened, until one night it spoke. He had been telling it about a dream. One where he opened a door and saw his mother crying on the floor, surrounded by candles. She had something in her hands. Something tiny in porcelain, shattered into pieces. She was whispering his name. And the wall pulsed, not just sound, movement. A soft expansion, like lungs filling. And then it said, "She doesn't want you to remember." Ellis sat upright in bed, heart pounding. Who? The wall was quiet. He stood, walked over to it, and placed his palm flat against the surface. "I won't forget," he promised. The doll was at his feet the next morning. A small slip of paper tucked beneath its arm. Written in childish, looping letters, "Follow the knocking." That day Ellis stopped listening to his teacher in class. The world outside the house had grown too slow, too dim. He no longer felt afraid of the dark. The dark knew him. He didn't flinch when the lights flickered in the hallway. He didn't cry when he got lost in the grocery store for half an hour and swore. He saw the same old woman on every aisle, staring with empty eyes and a smile that looked stitched on. The world had bent, and Ellis had bent with it. That night, the knocking began. 3 slow taps behind his wall. Then silence. He answered with 3 knocks of his own. The wall answered again, this time from the other side of the room. The next night it moved again, closer. Always 3 knocks, always just out of sight. By the 3rd night, Ellis didn't need to hear it. He felt it, under his bed, behind the mirror, inside the closet. And when he asked it where it was going, the voice came not from the wall, but from beneath his pillow. To make more rooms. Ellis smiled. He understood now. The house wasn't a place. It wasn't a building or a haunted stretch of road. It was a seed. And wherever the doll went, it planted something. A memory. An echo. A hallway with no exit. His mother tried to talk to him the following morning. She looked exhausted, eyes sunken, voice hoarse. She asked if he'd been sleeping, if he'd been hearing things. Ellis tilted his head and said, "You used to be someone else." She froze. "What? You're not really my mom." "Not anymore, you forgot." He walked away. That night she found drawings in his backpack. Dozens of them. Crude. Scrawled with broken crayons. All of the same thing, a house, twisted and tall, windows blacked out, smoke curling from a chimney that reached into the clouds. One drawing showed Ellis, standing in front of it, holding hands with a girl whose mouth was sewn shut. The same night, she woke up to the sound of 3 knocks. In the kitchen. She got out of bed, trembling, checked the door. Nothing. 3 more knocks. This time, from behind the pantry. She opened it and found the doll. No dust, no dirt. No sign it had been outside. Just waiting, watching. She threw it in the trash. Burned it in the backyard. But the next morning, it was sitting on the kitchen table. Ellis was already awake, eating cereal. He didn't look up. "She likes it here," he said. That day, he didn't come home from school. His backpack was found on the steps of an abandoned building 2 streets away, one that hadn't been occupied in decades. The windows were all broken. Police dogs found no scent trail. Cameras caught nothing. His mother insisted he never went near that place, that he was afraid of it. But that wasn't true. He'd drawn it, over and over. She broke down on live television a week later, begging for anyone with information. Behind her, pinned to the corkboard of missing children, was a new photo. Not of Ellis, of the doll. No one could explain how it got there. The woman running the front desk swore she didn't put it up. The reporter covering the story quit 3 days later. Too many dreams. Too many stares. Noah saw the news again. He and Maya had stopped speaking about the house. It had become a silent agreement. Say nothing. Stay still. Pretend the echo was just a fading hum. But the hum was back, and it was louder. Mia didn't knock when she came to his cabin. She just opened the door and stood in the threshold. "It's spreading," she said. Noah nodded. She placed something on the table. A piece of paper, a child's drawing, of a door. Room 14. Noah stared at it for a long time. Then, without a word, he picked up his coat and followed her back into the dark. The drawing was crude, thick lines, jagged corners, scribbled in crayon. But what it lacked in detail, it made up for in familiarity. Noah stared at it, the waxy smudge of the black door, labeled Room 14, bleeding across the page. The walls surrounding it were covered in squiggles that, at first glance, looked like nonsense. But as he traced them with his eyes, something clicked. They weren't just chaotic lines. They were a map, a floor plan, of a place he had never been, but somehow remembered. Like a dream he'd had as a child and forgotten until now. Maya stood across the table, arms crossed, her face tight with something he didn't want to name. Not anger, not fear. Worse than both, recognition. "He's drawing rooms that haven't been built yet," she said, voice low. "Or maybe He's drawing rooms that don't exist in our time. Maybe they're waiting. Noah looked up. You think he's where we were? Mia didn't answer right away. She just tapped the paper. This symbol. Here. We've seen it before. He followed her finger. A circle with a line through it, scrawled next to the door. No, he said. That was on the basement wall. Just outside room 0. And again in the attic, Mia added. Scratched into the floorboards. It's not a symbol. It's a seal. Noah felt something shift in his chest. A sick weight. Like his heart had been filled with gravel. A seal for what? Mia looked at him. Her eyes had changed in the months since they left the house. Not haunted. Not empty. Sharp. Like the house had carved her into something new. And she was still figuring out the shape of it. A seal for whatever isn't done yet, she said. Noah folded the drawing and tucked it into his coat pocket. Then we need to find it, he said. Mia hesitated. And do what Noah. Walk through it again. Let it take another piece of us. It already took him, Noah snapped, that boy. Ellis. He didn't walk into the house. The house came to him. It's not just waiting for people to remember anymore. It's seeking. Mia lowered her head. She didn't disagree. Later that night, they drove. No plan. No direction. Just the slow crawl through empty roads and forgotten neighborhoods, searching for something that couldn't be found by looking, only felt. Noah didn't even know what he was hoping for. A sign. A flicker. The scent of rot and smoke drifting across the windshield. They passed through towns that looked normal on the outside, but held a quiet wrongness. Windows that were too dark, streets too quiet, trees that leaned toward the houses like they were listening. At a gas station near the edge of Corbin Hollow, Mia went inside to buy coffee. Noah stayed in the car, staring at the road, and that's when he saw her. A girl, young, maybe 10, standing at the edge of the lot, barefoot in the gravel, nightgown torn. Hair plastered to her cheeks like she'd climbed out of a river. She was staring straight at him. In her hands, she held a doll. He got out of the car. Slowly, quietly. Mia, he called over his shoulder. But when he turned to gesture, the girl was gone. Just tire tracks in the dirt where she'd stood. But they didn't lead away. They led inward, toward the woods behind the station. Mia stepped out a moment later, cup in each hand. You saw something? He nodded. She had the doll. Maya didn't need him to explain. They followed the tracks, flashlights cutting through brambles. The night air thick with wet leaves, and a silence that settled on their shoulders like dust. After 20 minutes, the trees parted into a clearing. In the center, an old hunting cabin, slanted, rotting, but standing. It looked like it hadn't been touched in decades. But the front door was open. Noah stepped forward first. The floor groaned beneath his boots. The air inside smelled like mildew and old metal. A fireplace sat cold on one side, and along the opposite wall, a mirror, oval, iron-framed, just like before. But this time it didn't show the house. It showed room 14, a hallway built from impossible angles. Walls sloped inward, dripping with moisture, a door at the end. Black, breathing, Mia stepped beside him. That's the room Ellis drew. Noah reached toward the mirror, and the glass rippled under his fingers like water. A choice. Not taken this time by force. Not dragged in by guilt or grief. Invited, he looked at Mia. If we go in, we go together, she said. They stepped through. The world on the other side was wrong. Not terrifying. Off. Everything was a little too bright. The hallway was too long. The door too far away. But the space between didn't change as they walked. It stretched. Each step pulled the door further away, like they were walking on a moving walkway going the opposite direction, until Mia stopped. Noah. She pointed behind them. The mirror was gone, and in its place, rows of doors, all labeled, all familiar. Room 0, Room 1, Room 2, Room 13, Room 1, Room 12, Room 8, Room 14. But they weren't doors anymore. They were mouths, open, waiting. Then, from the ceiling, came the sound, knocking. 3 slow taps, then a pause, then 3 more. The walls around them pulsed. And then they heard him. Ellis, crying. Cow, no, Maya not in the room anymore. It moved. It's everywhere. They ran, toward the voice, toward the knocking, past doorways that opened on their own, revealing versions of themselves, broken, burned, hollow-eyed and grinning, and at the end of the hall, room 14, open, inside not Ellis, but a circle of children, all with dolls, all whispering, all facing a chair in the center where someone sat motionless. Noah stepped forward, and the figure raised its head, his own face, a mirror image of him, older, ragged, lips sewn shut, eyes bleeding. Mia grabbed his arm. The room began to spin. Which one is real? She whispered. He didn't know. But the children turned to them and said, in one voice, "You're not in the house anymore. The house is in you." The room didn't vanish this time. It didn't shudder or shift or collapse inward like a dying lung. It simply stayed, solid, still, waiting. The children encircling the chair stared with expressions, too blank to be innocent, too patient to be real. Their hands rested in their laps, each one clutching a porcelain doll identical to the others. Stitched mouths, black buttons for eyes, limbs too stiff for play. Dolls weren't supposed to look like they'd been watching you their entire lives. Noah couldn't look away from the figure in the chair. His own face, older, worn, lips sewn together like someone had wanted to stop him from screaming, or worse, speaking. He wasn't moving, not blinking. Just sitting as the children watched him like an audience, waiting for their favorite part of the story to resume. Mia stepped forward first. The children didn't move. She leaned in, eyes locked on the stitched figure. "Noah," she said softly. The sewn-eyed version of her brother didn't respond. She turned back to the real Noah. "What if this isn't a reflection?" she whispered. "What if it's a memory of what's coming?" Noah took a shaky breath. "You mean me later?" "No," she said. "You, again." That thought sank deep, heavier than fear. The idea that the rooms didn't just trap people, they looped them, rewrote them, turned them into set pieces for others to stumble across. A theater of forgotten selves. Echoes molded into mannequins, sitting in chairs while the children of the house gathered around and waited for the show to repeat. He circled the chair slowly. As he stepped behind it, the stitched Noah suddenly turned its head, just a fraction, and looked at him. Noah staggered back, heart hammering. His double didn't move again. But that twitch, that momentary flicker of life, told him one thing: this version of him was still conscious. Trapped. Silenced. The walls pulsed once. Then, the children spoke. "We're out now," they said in a perfect chorus. "We're out and we're building new rooms." Maya grabbed Noah's arm. "We need to go." "Go where?" he snapped. "There's no door anymore." "Then we make one," she hissed. "We remembered our way in. We can forget our way out." That sounded like madness, but then again, so did the stitched version of him. So did the children who never blinked. So did the doll that had followed them across counties and weeks and dreams. Mia closed her eyes. "No, listen to me. Think of something. A memory not touched by the house, something pure, unchanged." He fought through the mire in his head. So many of his memories now felt tainted, like they'd been stored in rooms with leaking ceilings. He couldn't trust them, couldn't trust himself. But, there, he found it. Maya's 6th birthday. Before the dreams, before the whispers, before the door on Renfield Road, the backyard, balloons, a crooked cake. The sun shining too hard on the icing, making it melt just a little. Mia blowing out the candles, missing 2 on the first try. Their dad laughing. Their mom handing out paper hats. The moment felt small, but real. Real in a way that burned through the house's fog like sunlight through smoke. He grabbed Mia's hand. "I've got it." He pictured the candles, the breeze, the uneven sound of children singing. The room began to flicker. The children twitched. Cracks ran through the walls, thin at first, then widening. "You're forgetting us," the chorus hissed. "You're leaving the door open." Noah focused harder. He saw the backyard, the way the grass itched his ankles. The plastic cup in his hand, slippery with condensation. The moment was solid. The house screamed, not in sound, in pressure. The stitched version of himself opened its eyes. They were his, and they were begging, not for rescue, for release. Noah stepped forward, without thinking, without fear. He placed a hand on his own shoulder and whispered, "I'll carry the weight. You don't have to anymore." The stitched figure nodded and dissolved into ash. The dolls cracked, the children crumbled, and the room broke like glass. He opened his eyes on a sidewalk. Dawn was breaking. Birdsong filled the air, and for the first time in weeks, he didn't hear it layered over breathing or whispers. Mia was beside him, gasping, hands scraped, knees bruised. They were in front of a church. A real one. Bells rang in the distance. Normal. Still. No police sirens. No news vans. Just an early morning silence as the town stretched into another Sunday. Noah looked around. No dolls. No doors. Just them. "Is it over?" he asked. Mia shook her head. Not for everyone. She reached into her coat and pulled something out. Ellis's drawing. It had changed. There were more rooms now. New ones, labeled with names they didn't recognize. People they hadn't met. Room 15 Julia, Room 16 Garrett, Room 17, the man in the orange hat, and at the very bottom, Room 0 reopened. Noah touched the paper, felt the faint hum beneath the crayon lines. Mia whispered, "It's not a place anymore. It's a network. A what? Of memories. Of fear. Of people. It's connected. Anyone who dreams it touches it. Anyone who speaks of it spreads it. The doors aren't in the house anymore, Noah. The house is behind the eyes." He looked up at the rising sun. It didn't feel warm. He realized then, with a kind of hollow ache, that no matter how far they drove, how long they stayed in the light, the rooms would keep building themselves. Inside closets. Inside dreams. Inside regrets. They were architects now, whether they wanted to be or not. And the worst part, somewhere out there, more people were remembering. More people were knocking. And the house, whatever it truly was always listening. Julia Tamsin didn't believe in ghosts. She believed in cracked drywall, flickering fuses, and the strange, mundane things that always went wrong in old houses. She was the kind of woman who kept her keys on a hook, her life in color, coded folders, and her fears neatly labeled and boxed like everything else she owned. Which made it all the more frustrating when the box marked childhood wouldn't stay closed. It started with the smell. She'd just moved into her new place. An aging brownstone at the edge of a city that had long since stopped remembering its corners. The rent was cheap, the neighborhood quiet, and the landlord eager to sign a lease without too many questions. Julia liked that. No fuss, no noise, no strangers asking about her past. But the moment she walked into the second bedroom, intended to become her home office, she caught a scent that didn't belong. Not must or mold, but something else. Something warm, like old wood soaked in sun, like birthday cake and candle smoke. Familiar in a way that pinched her chest before her mind could name it. She told herself it was nostalgia. Probably the lingering scent of some previous tenant. Maybe a child's room. Maybe the ghost of a holiday. But then she found the drawing, folded neatly, tucked between the slats of the closet's sliding door. A child's scrawl. A house, too tall, too narrow. Crooked windows and a chimney that leaned like it was whispering to the sky. Beneath it, a single word in green crayon, Remember. Julia stared at it for a long time. She should have thrown it away. Instead, she taped it to the wall above her desk. That night, the scratching started. It was soft, timid, almost, like fingernails on the inside of the closet. She got up, checked it, found nothing. But the smell was back, stronger now. Not just cake and candles, burnt sugar, smoke. She didn't sleep. In the morning, the drawing had changed. Same house, but now a figure stood in the doorway. A girl, hair long, face blank. And this time, there was a number written in red beside the house. Room 15. Julia stared at it, heart slow and heavy. She didn't know why her fingers trembled. Why her mouth felt dry. She didn't know the number, and yet she did. Like something from a story you heard as a child, but were told never to repeat. She opened her laptop and searched. Nothing. No room 15. No missing children. No haunted house in her neighborhood. But the search results were strange. The first 5 were normal. DIY home improvement blogs, a real estate listing for an empty plot of land, a forum post about liminal spaces with a handful of replies. But the 6th result was different. Just a title, "The House That Knocks," no preview. No date. Just a black square as a thumbnail. She clicked it. The page was blank except for a line of text that slowly faded in. Letter by letter, the house doesn't need walls to find you. It just needs the right name. Julia slammed the laptop shut, but that night the knocking began. 3 slow taps on the closet door. She sat in bed frozen, blanket clutched to her chest. Then a voice, soft, childlike, whispered through the dark, "Julia?" She didn't respond. The next morning, she found a crack in the closet wall. It hadn't been there before, and from the crack a draft, warm, sweet smelling, like birthday cake. She called a contractor. When they arrived 2 days later, the crack was gone. Nothing behind the closet wall but support beams and insulation. They looked at her funny when she asked them to tear it down anyway. She laughed it off, but inside, something shifted. That night, she had the dream. A hallway, too long, too narrow, doors on either side numbered in no order, the smell of ash and wax. A figure at the end, standing with its back turned. She called out, but the figure didn't move, until she stepped forward. Then it turned, and it was her. But older, hollow-eyed, smiling, with stitches across her mouth. She woke up screaming. The drawing had changed again. The house was on fire now, and a name had been added under room 15. Julia Tamson. She packed a bag. Drove for hours, no destination in mind, just away. She stayed in motels, slept with the lights on, burned the drawing in a roadside trash can. But it came back, folded in her glove box, then on the nightstand, then in her dreams. She found herself sketching rooms in the margins of hotel notepads, naming doors she'd never walked through. Whispers began to follow her, in gas station bathrooms, in quiet waiting rooms. She heard children humming songs she didn't recognize, but knew the words to. Then one night, she heard the knock again, but not on a wall, on her mind. It came like pressure, right between her eyes. A pulsing awareness that something was inside. And when she looked in the mirror, she saw a hallway where her reflection should have been. At the end of it, a door marked 15. Waiting, and beyond it laughter. Not cruel, not innocent, just expectant. Julia avoided mirrors after that. It wasn't vanity. She simply couldn't stand the way her reflection lingered a fraction of a second too long. Whenever she moved, it hesitated, as though waiting for the right moment to act on its own. She brushed her teeth in the dark. She dressed without looking. But mirrors aren't always glass. She caught her reflection in a spoon once, warped and trembling. And for a second it was smiling at her even though her lips were pressed into a terrified line. She threw the spoon away, but the image clung to her mind like mildew. She kept driving. Days blurred. Motels turned into rest stops. Her phone battery died and stayed dead. She stopped keeping track of the towns she passed, because the towns all began to look the same. Streets with no cars, storefronts with mannequins that stood too close to the glass, street lamps flickering like they were blinking. The world felt staged, a backdrop painted just for her, and then she saw it. Not the house, never the house itself, but the door. She woke up in a motel bed, sweat plastering her hair to her forehead, the sound of knocking still rattling in her skull. 3 taps. Pause. 3 taps. She sat up, breathing hard. At the end of the bed, the motel door stood ajar. She hadn't left it that way. She never left it that way. On the wood, carved deep enough to splinter 15, her legs wouldn't move at first. Her hands trembled as she pushed herself up. She half expected to wake up again, to peel out of another dream. but the floor was solid under her bare feet, and the sound of the highway outside the window grounded her in reality. She crept toward the door. Her hand hovered over the knob. "Don't," a voice whispered behind her. She spun around. No one there. Just shadows slouching against the peeling wallpaper. When she turned back, the door was closed. The number was gone. But she knew. It wasn't over. The next day she tried to ignore it. She stopped at a diner, ordered coffee, tried to read the paper. The waitress smiled, poured her cup, and leaned down too close. Her breath smelled of smoke and sugar. "You've got a door waiting, Julia," the waitress whispered, though her lips never moved. "Don't keep the house hungry." Julia left without paying. By nightfall, she'd driven to the next county. She'd pulled into a rest stop, parked under the yellow glow of a streetlight, and tried to calm herself. She told herself it was stress, that the house, if that's what it was, couldn't reach her if she didn't let it. That's when she noticed the drawing on her passenger seat. She hadn't seen it when she got in. It was the same house, same crooked chimney, but this time the front door was wide open. And written across the threshold, in red crayon, was her full name, Jalia Tamsayan. Inensity, her stomach dropped. She threw the paper out the window, started the car, drove until the fuel light screamed at her. She stopped at another motel, checked in under a false name, bolted the door, sat on the bed, shaking. Eyes glued to the television as a game show played at a deafening volume. She clung to the sound of people laughing, answering questions, clapping for strangers. Anything normal, anything that wasn't her. The knocking came anyway, this time not from the door, from the wall, right behind her headboard. 3 taps, pause, 3 taps. And then, in the television's static between channels, her own voice came through, clear as if she were whispering into her own ear. "Open it." She screamed and hurled the remote. The screen shattered. The room went dark. And in the dark, the wall split. Not wide. Just enough for a sliver of red light to leak through. She should have run. She should have left. But her body betrayed her. Her hand moved without her. Fingers touched the crack. Heat pulsed through her skin like a second heartbeat. The wall widened, stretching into a frame, until it wasn't a wall at all but a door. Her door. Room 15. Her name carved deep into the wood. She pushed it open and stepped inside. The smell hit her first. Sweet, rotting sugar, like a birthday cake left in the sun for weeks. The floor was sticky beneath her shoes. Balloons sagged from the ceiling, deflated and stained. Streamers drooped across the walls, coated in dust. At the center of the room stood a table. On it a cake, burnt black. Candles melted into jagged stumps. The icing spelled her name. Happy Ybirhda Jalia. She hadn't had a birthday party since she was 7. Her throat closed. She backed toward the door. But it wasn't behind her anymore. Instead, the wall shimmered with dozens of mirrors. Each one reflected her. But not her now. Her at 7. Her at 12. Her at 20. Each version staring back at her with the same expression. Not fear. Not joy. Just waiting. The cake sizzled. A candle reignited on its own. Then another. Then another. Until all 15 burned. The children's voices rose from nowhere, overlapping, layered. Heavy enough to make her knees buckle. Blow them out. Make a wish. The mirrors trembled. The icing on the cake bubbled. Letters melting until they spelled something new. Remamumbiar. Julia collapsed to her knees, hands over her ears, sobbing.
I don't want to remember,
she screamed. The voices laughed. You don't have to. We'll remember for you. The mirrors cracked. The room tilted. The candles flared, blinding white, and Julia was gone. Only the cake remained, still burning, still waiting. Noah hadn't slept in days. He didn't even try anymore. Sleep was where the house pressed hardest, where it slipped its whispers into the cracks of his thoughts. He'd close his eyes for minutes, just minutes, and wake up with drawings on the sheets, scrawled in his own hand. Pictures of rooms he hadn't seen yet, but somehow knew were real. Sometimes they were blank doorways with numbers. Sometimes they had names beneath them. He kept them all in a shoebox under the bed of the cabin. He and Mia still called safe, though both of them had long since stopped believing the word. This morning, the shoebox was open. Not by him. Not by Mia. And inside were 3 new drawings. Room 15, Room 16, Room 17. Each with names written in a childish scrawl that wasn't his. Jli tam sayan gariti estone a tichi manian tichi orangi had. He sat on the edge of the bed, staring, throat dry. Maya came in holding 2 mugs of coffee. She froze when she saw his face. What now? He showed her the papers. Her hands shook so badly she nearly dropped the cups. She's in, she whispered. Julia, whoever she is, she's in. How? Noah snapped. We burned the house. We starved it. Mia set the cups down hard enough that the liquid sloshed over the rims. Her eyes were wide, sharp. We didn't starve it. We fed it. Every time we said its name, every time we remembered, we spread it further. You think those drawings stay in this box? They're mirrors, Noah. What we put down on paper, someone else finds. What we dream, someone else walks. Noah wanted to argue. He wanted to shout that they hadn't had a choice, that surviving meant remembering. But deep down, he knew she was right. He'd seen the signs. He'd watched the stories pop up online. Message boards, Reddit threads, news blurbs about disappearances that felt too familiar. Words he recognized. Phrases that were never supposed to exist outside his own head. The house wasn't a place anymore. It was a network. And they had been its first messengers. He pulled the drawing of Julia closer, staring at the crude house with its crooked chimney. The door blazing with her name. So what happens when it finishes writing the list? Mia didn't answer. Because the question wasn't what happened when the house finished. The question was if it ever finished. They tracked Julia the only way they could, through the wake she left behind. The first clue was a news report, one Maya found buried at the bottom of a local station's website. A motel room in Ashgrove had been left in ruins, television smashed, mirror cracked, walls scorched in a perfect circle of ash. No one had checked out. No one had checked in after. The manager refused to speak on record, but an anonymous comment on the article said a piece of paper was found in the room, pinned to the bathroom door, with a steak knife. It read ROM 15 CLM. The second clue was worse. In a diner outside Corbin Hollow, the same place where Noah had once seen a barefoot girl staring at him, a waitress was overheard humming a tune while cleaning tables. Customers reported it wasn't English, not even words, just syllables strung together. But everyone who heard it claimed the same thing. They knew the song, like it was lodged in a childhood memory they couldn't place. Julia had vanished, but the room she entered hadn't. It had pushed outward, bleeding into strangers who didn't even know her name. Noah and Mia sat in the cabin late into the night, the air heavy with smoke from the fire they hadn't fed in hours. Papers covered the table, drawings, notes, scraps of things they barely understood. "Do you think she's still alive?" Noah asked finally. Maya looked at him. Alive doesn't mean safe. Not in there. What if we went back in? She shook her head. You don't get it. It's not about in anymore. It's not a house. It's rooms, floating, attaching, spreading like rot. We can't burn it down. We can't escape it. The only thing we can do. She stopped, because the knocking had started. Not on the walls, on the table. 3 taps. Pause. 3 taps. Noah stared at the shoebox. The lid rattled, slowly slid aside. Inside, the drawings moved. One slid to the top. Not room 15, not room 16, not room 17. A new one. Room 18. No, Garvus. His stomach dropped. Maya's hand found his, cold and trembling. The paper pulsed faintly as if it were breathing. And from the dark corners of the cabin came a whisper, layered and low, "We remember you." Noah didn't open the door. Not yet. He stared at the paper, the crayon drawing of a room numbered 18, with his full name etched in red, and tried to pretend it wasn't real. But his heart was already reacting like it knew the truth. It beat with that slow, sinking rhythm that came not from fear, but from recognition. The same kind of dread that crawled up your spine when you realize the nightmare you're trapped in isn't new. It's familiar. He sat at the kitchen table, the drawing still pulsing like a living thing in front of him. The knock had stopped, but the silence it left behind was somehow louder. Mia stood behind him, not touching, not speaking. She didn't need to. This wasn't her room. She couldn't follow him into this one, and she knew it. And so did he. It was always going to call you back, she said quietly. Noah ran his fingers through his hair. Why now? Why wait until now to show me the door? It didn't wait, Mia said. You just weren't ready to see it. He looked up at her sharply. She didn't mean it as a comfort. This room had always existed. He had been building it one brick at a time, every time he ran instead of helping. Every time he whispered about the house, when he should have stayed silent. Every time he tried to destroy the memory, but ended up spreading it instead. Room 18 wasn't constructed by trauma. It was made from guilt. The knock came again. But this time it was in his chest. 3 heartbeats. Pause. 3 more. He stood. The cabin shifted around him, the air growing dense and warm. A scent crawled into the room, earthy, coppery, like old rainwater soaking through wood beams. And underneath it, the sharp sting of ammonia. The smell of cleaning up something that should have stained. Noah walked to the back of the cabin. A hallway that hadn't existed before stretched out from the pantry. Dim light spilled from beneath a closed door at the end. No number on the door, but he didn't need one. He knew. Mia followed him to the threshold. I can't stop you, she said. I wouldn't ask you to. I'm staying here, she said, to anchor you. So you remember there's still a world outside of it. He nodded and placed a hand on the doorknob. Cold. Familiar. He turned it and stepped inside. Room 18 was not a space, it was a timeline. He wasn't in a room, he was in a sequence. A hallway stretched in both directions, looping and bending into impossible shapes. Along its walls hung moments, like paintings. But they were his memories, each framed and frozen, each one whispering to him as he passed. There was the moment he ran from the original house, leaving Mia behind. The guilt echoed off the walls. There was the time he lied to the search party, telling them he'd seen nothing when he'd heard Ellis's scream through the trees. There was the time he ignored a girl who tried to warn him at the gas station. The girl with the stitched doll. Every wrong turn, every moment of silence, every decision to forget when he should have remembered. They weren't just framed. They were alive. He stopped at one, Mia crying in the basement, screaming for him to pull her out of the hatch before it shut. He'd hesitated. A second too long. And the house had taken a piece of her that never came back. He moved on. The hallway narrowed. The lights above him buzzed and flickered, and then he reached a door labeled Conifus Ion. He pushed it open. Inside was a single chair in a dark room. In the chair sat someone he didn't recognize. An old man, bald, blindfolded, with wax dripping down both cheeks like tears. His hands were tied, his mouth stitched shut. Noah stepped forward. The man lifted his head, and though his eyes were covered, he saw Noah. The walls around them pulsed. You think you've escaped, said a voice from the ceiling. His own voice, but older, distorted. You think surviving is the same thing as healing. The man in the chair twitched. You've carried pieces of us with you, the voice continued. Guilt, denial, memory, all ingredients, all mortar, all part of the room. Noah backed toward the door, but the handle was gone. In its place another mirror. Not glass, not metal, but skin, his skin. It pulsed. A breath moved through the room. You don't get to walk away from what you built, Noah, the voice hissed. You're the architect now. The man in the chair stood. His bindings fell away, and he smiled, because he had Noah's face. Another version, not stitched, not mute, just cold, resolved. You brought us out of the house, the doppelganger said. You carried us through memory, through fear. You opened the door for room 0 to reopen. You spread us further than the house ever could alone. Noah staggered back. No. You told the story, his twin said. You remembered. That's all the house ever needed. The walls cracked, the floor split, and the room tipped. Noah fell into darkness. When he woke up, Maya was kneeling over him, shaking his shoulders. They were back in the cabin. The hallway was gone. The drawing of room 18 lay on the floor, burned at the edges. He gasped, hands clutching at his chest. You were gone, Mia said, her voice cracking. For 3 hours. I couldn't get through. He blinked up at her. I saw it. The real purpose. It's not just about scaring people. It's not about death. It's about construction. The rooms are being built inside us. Through memory. Through guilt. Through the story. Every time someone tells it, the house gets another room. Another layer. Mia stared. Then that means, Noah nodded, it's going to keep growing. Until it's not just a place anymore. Until it's a world. Garrett Stone wasn't a believer. Not in ghosts, not in God. And definitely not in the stories people told late at night to make themselves feel better about the things they couldn't explain. He was a man of cold facts and colder truths, a former war reporter who'd seen more than his share of real horror. Burned villages, broken bodies, screams that didn't come from lungs, but from some deeper place people never talked about afterward. He had stopped chasing monsters a long time ago because he knew the truth: the worst ones didn't wear claws or crawl from shadows. They wore uniforms, smiled, voted, loved. So when the podcast producer pitched the episode, he almost laughed her out of the room. A series on collective memory hauntings. A house that appeared only through dreams. Doors with numbers that showed up in drawings from missing children. The word room always paired with a number, always written in red. A whisper of something called Room 0. The phrase, the house that remembers you. It was ridiculous, but she was persistent. And Garrett, well, he hadn't felt curious about anything in years. So he said yes. Just one episode. Just a voiceover. No deep dive. No nightmares. Just a story. It aired on a Thursday. Room 0, the house you remember but never visited. And for the first time in his life, Garrett Stone felt the story crawl into him. At first, he didn't notice anything strange. A few listeners sent creepy emails. Someone mailed in a drawing, crayon on butcher paper, of a narrow house with too many windows and a door slightly ajar. He chuckled, pinned it to his office wall, and forgot about it. Until he saw the door in his dreams. It wasn't dramatic. No thunder. No screaming. Just a hallway. Familiar in the way DAG view is familiar. It stretched on forever, humming gently with a sound just beneath the threshold of hearing. And there, at the very end, was a door. Black. Wooden. Solid. On it Room 16 Garrett Stone. He woke up choking on air, drenched in sweat. But the worst part was the feeling he had just come back from somewhere. The next night, the dream returned. But this time, the door was open, and someone was standing just inside. He didn't recognize the figure. No face. Just the shape of someone, tall, still, waiting. He didn't go in. Didn't dare. But the next day, the drawing on his wall had changed. The door was no longer ajar. It was wide open, and drawn behind it was him. Same coat. Same shoes. Same haunted expression. He tore the picture down, burned it, drank half a bottle of whiskey, and stared at the wall for hours, waiting for some rational explanation to hit him. None came. Instead, at 3:33 a.m., his phone rang. No caller ID, he answered. The line crackled. A child's voice whispered, Garrett Stone. Room 16 is ready. He slammed the phone down, unplugged it, but the message was already burned behind his eyes. He stopped sleeping. He started seeing things. Not people. Not ghosts. Doors in the backs of buses. In elevators that led to floors with no numbers. Reflections in puddles that showed something behind him. Always a door, always opening. He stopped going outside. The story was eating him alive. He called the producer, furious. Accused her of planting ideas, manipulating him. But she didn't answer. He later found out she'd gone missing. Last seen checking into a roadside motel off Route 7. Police found her car. Inside was a notebook filled with dozens of names, each one scratched out except for one, Garrett Stone, and beneath it, 2 words, "Do not record again." By then, Garrett knew it was too late. His voice was already part of the house. People had heard it, shared it, remembered it, and that's all the house needed. He'd invited it in. And the moment he spoke it, he'd started building room 16. Not in a house, but in himself. He began hearing knocking, not always external. Sometimes it came from inside his chest, a subtle tap behind his ribs, like someone was waiting patiently to be let out. Then came the sounds through the vents. Whispers, laughter, not cruel, not mocking, welcoming. "You've done good work," the voice said one night as he sat in the dark with his recorder. "You've told our story. You've carried the door into more ears than we could have imagined." Garrett tried to fight it. He scrubbed the episode from every feed, issued a retraction, told his listeners it was a hoax. But people don't forget that kind of fear. Not once it takes root. You can't unhear the creak of a door opening just behind your eyelid. You can't unfeel the way the number 16 starts showing up everywhere, on receipts, clocks, license plates, always watching, always smiling. And the more he tried to erase it, the deeper the room grew. Until one night, it manifested. He was in his apartment, pacing, trying to drown out the knocks with static on the radio. But then, between the stations, he heard something new, a recording of his own voice. Except it was saying things he'd never said. Things about the house, about doors, about the origin. Then the radio hissed into silence, and the closet door opened. There was no closet behind it anymore, just a hallway. Narrow, deep, lit by candles that dripped wax made of sound. At the end, the door was waiting. Room 16, his name scratched beneath it, and a figure inside. This time, the figure stepped out. It had his face, but it was thinner, paler, smiling. Garrett screamed, but the thing simply walked up to him and pressed a finger to his lips. "Shh," it whispered. "Your story is still being told." And Garrett, screaming, breathless, cornered, watched as the copy stepped forward and walked into him. A click echoed through his bones, like a door closing, like a lock sliding into place. When Noah and Mia found Garrett's apartment, it was empty. No signs of struggle, no signs of life, except for a tape recorder sitting on the table, still warm. It played back 3 words, spoken in Garrett's voice, but not with his cadence. "Room 16, claimed." And then silence, until the tape hissed once more, and whispered next. The first time anyone saw him, he wasn't really there. Just a blur in the corner of a CCTV frame. Standing at the edge of a school parking lot in broad daylight. No one remembered seeing him in person. No children spoke to him. No staff confronted him. But there he was, in frame 236 of a security reel dated 6 months before Ellis disappeared. No face, no badge. Just a man, tall and still, wearing a heavy orange knit hat despite the summer heat. The footage was dismissed at the time. Just a loiterer, a harmless drifter. But when the video was reviewed again, after the Harmon boy vanished, after Julia Tamson's name made its way onto red, drawn doors, after room 16 was sealed, something had changed in the frame. The man was closer, no longer at the edge of the lot, now just 10 feet from the entrance. And this time, he was looking straight into the camera. Noah found the footage by accident. Or maybe the house placed it in his path, like it had done with everything else. It was buried deep in a message board thread titled Temporal Shifts in Public Security Feeds, Anomalies, and Ghosts. Most of it was nonsense, the kind of paranoia that filled lonely hours. But the image, the orange hat, it stopped Noah cold. Because he had seen that hat before. Not in real life. Not in a dream. In a drawing. Ellis's drawing. Tucked between the cracked lines of his crayon house. There had been a stick figure in orange. No features. Just a blocky head and a caption in trembling scrawl. He watches but doesn't blink. Noah had assumed it was a child's invention. A background detail. But now it was something else. A name without a name. A room number that hadn't been listed yet. Mia found the second clue 3 days later. A police report from 1997, filed in a town that no longer existed on maps. A man had been pulled over for driving without plates. No ID, no license, just a backpack full of notebooks. Every page filled with drawings of doors. Some normal, most not, each one marked with a number, none higher than 0. When asked for his name, he said, "You can't write it. It's not meant to be said yet." The officer, irritated, wrote down a description instead: white male, mid-30s, wearing a thick orange knit cap. Refused to remove it. Claimed his ears weren't real. The man was held overnight. The next morning, his cell was empty. No signs of escape, no damage to the lock. Just a message scrawled into the wall in what looked like rust. Do-or-am-t-l-d-m-e. Noah and Maya went cold when they read that line. Because 3 nights ago, before the dreams started again, they'd woken up to find a message smeared on the cabin wall. They'd thought it was mold. They'd scrubbed it away, but now they remembered. It had said "Ease Komen and Chitaroghttheum Arkedroms." The man in the orange hat didn't belong to a number. He was the thread between them. The one who moved between rooms. Not marked. Not named. Just present. Always. Watching. The next night, Noah couldn't sleep. His eyes burned, but he didn't dare close them. The knocking had stopped, replaced now by the sound of breathing, as if someone were standing just behind him, matching his inhale and exhale. He turned. No one. But on the wall above his bed, a shape had formed. A rectangle. Subtle. A door. No knob. No frame. Just the idea of it. And etched faintly into the drywall, so faint he nearly missed it. Uncla Imand Raum Helenesis Men. He staggered back. Mia called from the other room. "Noah, come see this." He followed her voice, heart slamming. She stood in front of the fireplace, eyes locked on the ashes. "Something was burned here," she said. Something recent. They hadn't used the fire in days. Noah stepped closer. There, in the ashes, untouched by the char, lay a folded piece of paper. He picked it up. It was a drawing. Same house. Same door. But the number was missing. Instead, a circle had been drawn around the house itself. And beneath it, in a child's messy handwriting, "The man with no room comes when you forget his name." Noah's hands went numb. Mia stared at him. "What does it mean?" she whispered. He couldn't answer. Because in that moment, he did forget. Not the drawing. Not the house. His own name. Gone. Slipping through his mind like water through a cracked cup. He clutched the paper tighter, trying to ground himself. But then the cabin door creaked open. They hadn't touched it. And standing in the frame, where the stormy night should have been, was only darkness. And at the edge of that darkness, a silhouette. Tall. Still. A heavy orange knit cap atop his head. No face. No voice. No sound, except the soft shuffle of footsteps as he began to walk into the room. The lights flickered. The temperature dropped. And the door behind him faded. Vanished as if it had never existed. Just darkness. And then he stopped. Lifted a hand, pointed at Noah. And in a voice that didn't come from a mouth, but from every wall at once, the house spoke. "His room is under yours." The man in the orange hat didn't move. He stood beneath the cabin's frame, like he'd always been part of it, like the house itself had been waiting for this moment to take its first breath. Noah couldn't speak, couldn't blink, couldn't even scream. All he could do was stand there and feel the weight of the silence that the figure dragged in with him. Thick, wet, and patient. The air inside the cabin shifted, as if the walls were holding their breath too. Mia grabbed Noah's wrist, whispering his name, but it didn't sound like his anymore. Not after what the voice. That voice had just said, "His room is under yours." She tried to move him, to pull him away, but his feet had anchored. That phrase, "under yours," looped in his head, digging through memories, trying to find where it belonged. But it didn't belong anywhere, because there was no room 0. At least, there wasn't supposed to be. They had thought room 1 was the beginning. They'd traced the numbers, counted the victims, connected the drawings and names and timelines like breadcrumbs leading back to some twisted origin. But room 0 wasn't the first. It wasn't the start. It was something worse. It was the foundation. The man in the orange hat stepped inside. He didn't walk. He shifted, like the space moved around him. With each step, the lights above flickered harder, groaning like they were struggling to keep him visible. Mia backed away. Noah remained still. The man's presence carried no menace. He didn't threaten. He didn't scream. He simply was. He lifted one finger and pointed to the floor. Noah followed the gesture. The cabin's wooden boards were aging rapidly, right before their eyes, darkening, cracking, groaning. And in the center, between the couch and fireplace, the floor began to split. Not violently, no quake, no crash. Just a quiet cracking, like an old book being opened for the first time in centuries. Beneath the boards was no basement, no dirt, no pipes, just depth, a hole, impossibly black, spiraling down into something that swallowed the light before it could touch the edges. The heat of it was wrong. Cold at first, then suddenly hot, then gone. The smell hit next dust, ash, and something rotten but sweet, like overripe fruit left in a sealed trunk. Mia whispered, "That's not a place." Noah shook his head. "It's a memory." And it was. Not a room you could walk into, but one you remembered from the moment you saw it. It wasn't built in this house. It didn't exist in any architecture. It existed under every room, under every story, under every word they'd ever said about the house. Room 0 wasn't numbered because it wasn't counted. It wasn't entered because it was never meant to be found. You didn't visit it. It visited you. The man in the orange hat stepped back, disappearing into shadow like a mirage fading from focus. He'd done his part. He'd pointed. Now the house waited. Noah took a step forward. Maya stopped him. "You don't have to go down there." "I think I already have," he said. He turned to her, face pale and eyes wild. "What if I've always been in it? What if all the rooms we've been through are just walls inside room 0? Before she could answer, a voice rose from below the floor. But it wasn't a voice, not really. It was the air sound of every voice they'd ever heard in the house. Ellis, Julia, Garrett, even their own, layered into a whisper that wasn't spoken through mouths, but through memory. It said, "Down here, we keep the stories you tried to forget." And then it added, quieter, "Come see what you left behind." Noah dropped to his knees and stared into the hole. He saw nothing, but he remembered everything. The day his sister vanished in 1996. The hallway with the red wallpaper. The broken porcelain face smiling from the sink. The phone calls in the night. The laughter that wasn't aimed at him but through him. The dreams he used to call nonsense, but now understood were visits. He had never escaped the house. He was part of the foundation too. He slipped one leg into the hole. The air changed, time bent. He could feel moments stretch thin across his skin, like spider webs. His other leg followed. Then his waist. Mia sobbed his name, grabbing his hand, but the pull was too strong. She wasn't enough to hold him anymore. And he wasn't enough to leave her behind. But he had to go, because deep down they both knew. Room 0 didn't take people. It just waited until they remembered enough to walk into it willingly. As Noah disappeared into the dark, the hole sealed behind him, quiet as a whisper. The cabin floor was whole again. Mia stood alone, and on the wall behind her, burned into the wood, was a new line of text, "One remains above to tell the tale." She turned, trembling, because the words weren't written in blood, they were drawn, in crayon. Inside room 0, Noah stood in a hallway with no end and no walls, surrounded by thousands of versions of himself. Not exact copies, but moments. Every moment he'd ever questioned the house. Every second he told someone not to believe. Every word he used to bury the truth. They stared at him, hollow-eyed, whispering in unison, "You made this place possible." Noah staggered forward. There was no direction, just down, always down. Room 0 was gravity for the soul, and it didn't trap you. It reflected you. Not just who you were, but what you had done. He passed by memories that didn't belong to him. A girl burying a doll in her backyard. A boy stepping through a mirror. A woman drawing numbers into her skin with a broken pencil. A priest hammering a door shut with his own crucifix. These were all victims, but also builders. Each of them had contributed. Each of them made Room 0 stronger. He tried to scream, but in Room 0, sound didn't carry. Only memory did. Mia didn't move for hours after the floor sealed. She sat on the cold wood in the same spot Noah vanished. Knees pulled tight to her chest, eyes locked on the place that was no longer a door, but still felt like one. Time didn't move normally in that cabin anymore. The air didn't shift, didn't carry dust or warmth or breath. It just hung, waiting. She knew better than to speak. The house listened now, more than ever. Every word was a trigger. Every sound a potential invitation. She wasn't sure how long had passed before she noticed the smell. Not rot, not blood, paper, old paper, burned at the edges. Like something smuggled out of a fire that had lasted too long. She turned her head slowly, carefully, and saw a stack of drawings sitting on the table where the shoebox used to be. But she hadn't put them there, and she hadn't seen anyone enter the cabin. Her name was on every one. Room 21 to Mia Kessler, over and over again. But the drawings weren't of a room. They were of her. Not stick figures, not childlike scribbles. Detailed renderings. Sketches of her standing in the kitchen, sitting on the couch, staring into the fire. In one she was crying, in another screaming, in another laughing, but the last one made her heart stop cold. In it, she was asleep, and standing above her bed was Noah, but his face was wrong, blank, erased, and in his hand he held a key made of bone. The caption read, "He comes back changed." She backed away from the table slowly, breath catching in her throat. She turned toward the bedroom, empty. She hadn't slept in 3 nights. Not since Noah had fallen. But the drawing said she would. Which meant it hadn't happened yet. The house wasn't just showing memories anymore. It was writing the future. Maya knew what it meant. Room 0 had consumed Noah, but it wasn't going to keep him. Not forever. The house didn't want to keep people. It used them, reshaped them, made them part of the structure. And once they'd become blueprints, it sent them back to help build the rest. She looked around the cabin. It felt tighter, narrower, as if the walls had inched closer without making a sound. She tried the front door. Locked. No, gone. Replaced with a wall of bookshelves filled with titles she recognized. Because they were all hers. Journals she'd kept, notebooks she'd burned, diaries she'd lost as a child. All sitting there, rewritten. One caught her eye. She pulled it free. Inside was a message. Handwritten in her own cursive, but shaky, uneven. "You're the last story. The final narrator. Once you speak, the house finishes." She dropped the book. Because she understood now. Room 21 wasn't a location. It was a decision. She was the last voice that hadn't told the story. Every victim had remembered it, spoken of it, shared it. Even those who'd tried to bury it had, by resisting, given it form. But Maya had stayed silent. All these years. Even when she saw it. Even when she lived through it. She'd never shared. Never published. Never spoken publicly. She was the final seal, and the house needed her to break. That night, the dreams started again. But they weren't hers. They were borrowed. She dreamed of Ellis's mother, wandering a hallway of flickering lights, whispering her son's name as doors slammed behind her one by one. She dreamed of Julia, curled up in a room made of mirrors, each one reflecting a different version of her life. In one, she never entered the house. In another, she never left. She dreamed of Garrett Stone screaming into a microphone that wouldn't record, begging people to forget his voice. And she dreamed of Noah, standing in a void, arms outstretched, mouth open, but no sound escaping. He was trying to warn her. She couldn't hear the words, but the fear was loud. She woke up gasping. The bedroom was freezing. The fire had gone out, and Noah was standing in the doorway, but it wasn't him. Not really. He wore his face, his clothes, his eyes. But there was stillness in him now. A quiet that didn't belong. And in his right hand, he held something small. A tape recorder. He walked slowly into the room and placed it on the floor beside her. Then he spoke. "Mia, you have to finish it." His voice was flat, distant, like he was repeating something memorized. She backed away. "You're not him." He blinked slowly. "I remember being him. That's enough. The house let me keep the shape." He pointed to the recorder. "It only needs your voice now." "I won't," she whispered. "You can't make me." He smiled. Not cruel, relieved. "That's the point. You have to choose." The lights flickered. The walls breathed. And behind him, in the shadows of the hallway, more figures stood. Dozens, maybe hundreds. All with blank faces. All holding recorders, waiting. Mia looked around, realizing the cabin was no longer the cabin. It was the house. It had swallowed it whole. And room 21 had already formed around her. Walls whispering, door humming, air thick with memory. Noah stepped closer. "You can walk out," he said, "if you tell it. If you finish the story, the house completes." "The room's close." Maya trembled. "What happens if I don't?" The figures behind him stirred, and one smaller, childlike, stepped forward. It was Ellis, holding a doll, its mouth still stitched shut. The child whispered, "Then we keep building." The floor cracked beneath her. Another room forming. Another number waiting. Mia stared at the recorder. Her hand hovered over it, shaking. And in that moment, she realized the house didn't need truth. It just needed a story. It didn't matter if it was right or wrong, real or not. It just needed to be told. She picked up the recorder, held it close, pressed the button, and said, "My name is Mia Kessler, and this is the end." The cabin was silent. For the first time since Noah vanished, since the man in the orange hat stepped through its frame, since the drawings started whispering in crayon lines and the doors began forming from memory, the house was still. No creaks, no shadows moving in the corners, no soft tapping from underneath the floors, just stillness, just quiet. Mia sat on the bed, the recorder in her hands, thumb still resting on the button. She had said the words. She had spoken them without knowing why, without knowing if she believed them. "My name is Mia Kessler, and this is the end." That was it. No flourish, no revelation. Just 7 words spoken with a dry throat and tear-stung eyes. And yet the house had listened. The figures behind Noah had vanished. He had vanished. The door behind him had simply closed, not slammed, not sealed, just shut, like it was satisfied, like it had heard what it needed and could now rest. But Mia didn't trust silence. Not here. Not in a place where walls were stitched from memory and footsteps echoed even when you didn't move. She stayed awake until sunrise, staring at the recorder, wondering if she should press play. She didn't, because deep down, she knew if she heard her own voice say those words again, it would make them real. It would finalize the ending. And endings, in this house, weren't promises. They were warnings. When morning finally came, it felt wrong. The light through the window was too soft, like it wasn't sunlight at all, but some imitation filtered through glass that remembered what daylight used to be. The world outside was still, but off. The trees leaned a little too close. The grass didn't move even as the wind passed through it. The sky was gray, but not from clouds, just from absence. Mia stepped outside. No footprints in the dirt, no sign of the car, no roads. The forest was gone. In its place stood a field of doors, hundreds of them, maybe thousands. Some old and rotting, others new, clean, untouched. All standing upright, unconnected to any walls, all facing different directions, each one marked with a number. Room 3, Room 7, Room 19. All the ones she had heard about, but many she hadn't. Room 41, Room 98, Room 102. Some had no numbers, some had names, some just had symbols. And in the middle of the field, A single black door. No frame, no knob, no mark. Room 0. She walked toward it, heartbeat slow but heavy, each step crunching on the dry, dead grass. When she reached the door, it didn't move, didn't whisper. It simply stood, waiting. Mia pressed her hand to its surface. It was warm, breathing. And for the first time, she understood. Room 0 was never meant to be entered. It wasn't a destination. It was the anchor, the base. The first word ever spoken in fear. The original story. The unremembered trauma. Room 0 was the part of every person that refuses to let go of what hurt them. She looked out over the field again. The doors stood like tombstones. Not graves of bodies, but of choices. Every door was a version of the story. Every one a person who had once seen, or heard, or dreamed. The house hadn't ended. It had finished loading. Now that Mia had spoken her piece, the system was complete. Every story was now accessible. Every nightmare cataloged, not to keep people out, but to invite them in. Later that day, Mia found herself walking through the field. She didn't remember deciding to. The doors didn't creak. They didn't open. They just watched her, silently judging, silently welcoming. And then she saw one that stopped her cold. Room 34. No drawing had ever shown it. No voice had ever spoken of it. But her name was on it. Not written. Carved. Mia Kessler, final row M. She stood before it, hands trembling. Her breath caught in her throat. She felt the weight of everything behind her. Noah, Ellis, Garrett, the man in the orange hat, Julia, the girl with the stitched doll. All the memories. All the screams, all the knocks. Everything that had come before this moment. The story she had tried so hard not to tell. But this wasn't the end. It was the last page before the next book. Room 34 wasn't closure. It was transition. And it was waiting for her to decide what kind of story it would be. She reached for the handle. It didn't resist. The door swung open without a sound. Inside, she saw herself, older, tired, smiling, sitting at a desk writing. Not with fear, but with understanding, writing down the rooms, naming the doors, creating maps so others would know where not to go, or where to go if they needed to face something no one else could understand. The future self looked up and said, "Finish it." Mia stepped inside and closed the door behind her. Back in the real world. Whatever that meant now. A hiker found a cassette tape buried in the dirt near an old trailhead long since blocked off by overgrowth. He played it on a whim, using an old player he kept in his truck for nostalgia. A woman's voice spoke, "My name is Mia Kessler. And this is the end." The hiker laughed. Thought it was a prank. He tossed the tape aside. Later that night, he dreamed of a hallway and a door, numbered 35, with his name written in red. It started as a rumor. A post on a survivalist message board titled, "Unusual door found in Cascade Range. Doesn't match any Forest Service structure." A single blurry photo followed. Just a wooden door, half buried in a hillside, freestanding with no hinges, no frame, and no indication of what it might lead to. No explanation, no context. But something about the photo made people stare longer than they should have. The angle was off. The shadows fell in the wrong direction. And in the upper left corner of the image, almost too faint to notice, was the outline of another door. Visible inside the wood of the first. A door within a door. Most dismissed it as a hoax. Some laughed. Others got quiet. But the thread didn't disappear. It spread. And when someone posted a second photo, taken 6 years earlier, in a completely different state, showing an identical door lodged between two crumbling stone walls, everything changed. Because that door had a number. Room 5 written in red paint. Underneath it, faint but legible, 3 words, "Don't follow maps." And just like that, the house had begun to reach again. Somehow, somewhere, someone had found what Maya had left behind. Not just the tape, not just the stories. The map, or rather, a set of directions that shouldn't have existed. A crude diagram scrawled in a water-damaged journal found near a collapsed hiking shelter in Oregon. Each page was filled with coordinates, sketches of strange rooms and door numbers, pages torn out, pages blacked out, scribbles in multiple hands. But one name appeared again and again at the bottom of entries: MK, the same initials branded onto the spine of the cassette tape. Soon after, urban explorers started organizing trips into the empty trails, patches of national parks that had been closed off without public notice. Entire paths vanished from online maps. GPS acted up, radios went dead, and always the same report came back: they found a door, never open, always cold, and the same rule written nearby, either on trees, rocks, or in the dirt itself: don't follow maps, follow memory. In the forums, they began calling it the room walk. Not a location, a path. If you walked it correctly, doors appeared. If you didn't, nothing, or worse. Someone posted a recording of a knocking sound that wouldn't stop, even after they left the trail. It played every night at the same time. 3 knocks, a pause, then one long scrape. Others said they started dreaming of people they didn't know. A man in an orange hat standing by a roadside. A little girl holding a stitched doll with a number 8 on its dress. A woman with burned fingers pressing her hand against a window that didn't reflect anything. But the worst reports were from those who made it to room 13. Because that door, unlike the others, opened. Only once. Just a crack. But the person who saw it claimed something looked back. Not a person. Not a creature. Just a memory they didn't recognize. Something they had never lived but still remembered. And it whispered their name. The government denied everything. Park services cited weather damage and landslide risks for the trail closures. But some former rangers anonymously leaked a document labeled MK Archive Door Catalog, the partial. It listed 112 room numbers, known sightings, and associated symptoms: insomnia, hallucinations, identity drift, recursive memory loops, emotional detachment. The document's margins were covered in hand, written warnings: do not enter room 0. Rooms 21-34 are locked. Do not lies 10 to the tupis. If you see your name on a door, do not approach. At the bottom, someone had scrawled in red marker: she tried to finish the story. But stories don't end, they wait. Noah's name reappeared next. Not online, not in whispers. On a wall in a motel room that hadn't been booked in 20 years. A cleaning crew found it. Room 118 at the abandoned Silver Pines Inn. Every surface inside was covered in writing. Phrases, names, numbers. And in the center of the bathroom mirror, etched deep into the glass: no H. Rao Mumnavar Let's Go. Police sealed the room, but a week later, it happened again. Different city, different building, same message, same name. The map was growing, but not by distance. By memory. Every person who read the story, heard the tapes, saw the doors, became part of it. A node. A bookmark. A doorway. That's what Mia had done. She hadn't stopped the house. She had externalized it. Now, the doors didn't need to be sought. They found you. In a final post from Maya's original burner account, found only after tracing VPN logs back through 5 dead networks, a simple message was posted to the forum. I only wanted to finish it. But the house is a recorder. It remembers every voice, every footstep, every knock. I don't know where the story goes next. But it won't stop. Not now. Don't follow the map. Burn it, if you can. But most of all, don't remember. Please. For God's sake, don't remember SS, but of course, someone did. A teenage girl in New Mexico who had never left the state. She had a dream about a red door in the middle of her school gymnasium. When she woke, the soles of her feet were black with soot. She drew what she saw, posted it on her art blog, tagged it from Dream Journal, and in the corner of her drawing, she accidentally wrote something she didn't remember thinking: Arom 35 Phi RST Time, last TIME. It went viral in less than a day. The story wasn't done. The house had new voices, new narrators. And somewhere, room 36 was already forming. Mark didn't believe in ghosts. He didn't believe in haunted houses, cursed rooms, or viral stories that claimed to infect your memory. He especially didn't believe in anything called the room walk. As far as he was concerned, It was just another urban legend that had gotten too big. A chain letter dressed up with red numbers and creepy drawings. He had read the threads, seen the low-res photos of standing doors in forests and staircases that led to nowhere, and laughed them off. People had always loved making themselves scared. Fear was an easy thrill, especially when you could close your laptop and it disappeared with the tab. But that was before the wall of his apartment changed. It happened on a Tuesday. Quiet day. Mark was home early from work, rain pounding outside. The kind of steady downpour that made everything feel slower. He poured himself a drink, turned on the TV, and halfway through flipping through channels, his screen went black, then static, then a flash of red, not bright, not blinking, just a red door, burned into the screen for maybe half a second before everything cut out completely. He cursed, shook the remote, rebooted the system. Nothing. Then the smell hit. It wasn't electrical or burning plastic, it was paper. Old, wet, rotten paper. He turned toward the hallway and stopped breathing. A door was there. Not a physical one. Not yet. But the outline of one had appeared in the wall beside his bathroom. Perfectly rectangular, darker than the rest of the paint, pulsing slightly. Not with light, with memory. That's the only way he could describe it. It felt like it remembered something. Something about him. Mark approached it slowly, heart thudding. At eye level, scrawled in something that looked like crayon, were 3 words, Room 37 Mark. He stumbled back, heart pounding, suddenly unsure of everything. He grabbed his phone, snapped a photo, only to find the image was blank. No door. Just an empty wall. He touched the spot. It felt like regular plaster. Nothing unusual. But the outline remained, visible to the naked eye. Invisible to the lens. He didn't sleep that night. Not because the door did anything, but because he kept hearing his name whispered from the other side of the wall. Low, gentle, almost comforting. Mark, come see. By Friday, the door was solid, real, wooden, painted a deep, cracked red. There was no knob, just a small slot like a mail chute with something resting inside. Mark slid it out, a cassette tape, no label, no case, just a strip of masking tape on the back that read PLAMME, REMMBR. He didn't own a cassette player. He hadn't touched one in over 20 years. But when he opened his hall closet, looking for his toolbox, he found one sitting right on the top shelf. Still dusty. Still broken in the same place he remembered it being cracked. A player he threw out in 2006. He stared at it for a long time, then pressed the tape in. It clicked. The reel spun, and a voice began to speak. Not static, not distortion, his voice. Reading something he had never written. I know you don't believe me, Mark, but you will. When the door is real, when the knocking starts, when the light bends wrong and your name appears in a place no one else should know. The voice paused, then continued. You're in the house now. You've always been. You just didn't see the number on your wall until tonight. He ejected the tape, shaking. This was a prank. It had to be. But that night, he saw something in his dream he couldn't ignore. A woman sitting at a desk, writing. A cabin. A recorder. And behind her, a forest made of doors. He didn't recognize her, but she turned, looked straight at him, and whispered, Room 37 was always yours. Even when you refused to remember. When he woke, the door in the hallway was open. Just a crack. Enough to see a hallway that didn't belong to his building. The floor was wooden. Wet. The walls were lined with drawings. The kind you'd expect from children, if children were asked to sketch what hell looked like. There were numbers scrawled on every inch of the corridor, and footsteps, moving away, fading into echo. He slammed the door shut, but it didn't lock. It didn't even latch. Mark tried to leave the apartment, but the elevator never arrived. The stairwell looped him back to the 7th floor every time, and every room he entered inside his unit, kitchen, bathroom, even his bedroom, began showing variations. Pictures on the walls that weren't his. A toothbrush that had never belonged to him. A message in the mirror fogged in condensation. You're remembering. That's how it starts. He tried writing it off. Stress, isolation, mental break. But nothing explained why his mail started arriving with his name printed twice. Mark, room 37. Mark. Nothing explained why, when he called his brother said, I thought you moved years ago. Didn't you say something about a cabin? Mark had never owned a cabin. But when he looked at his bookshelf that night, tucked between a Stephen King novel and an old hiking journal, there was a book he had never seen before, The Map of Rooms, author M.K. He flipped through it. Every page was blank, except the last. A single line, skeptics build the strongest doors. He sat in front of his red door all night, watching, listening. He didn't want to go in. He didn't want to see what the house had stored for him. But it wasn't about going in anymore. It was about noticing. Once you saw your room, the house had you. No force needed, just memory, just recognition. That was enough. The door creaked open again, this time wider, this time welcoming. Mark didn't remember stepping through the door. One moment, he was sitting in front of it, watching it open wider than it ever had, as if it had finally decided he was ready. The next, he was standing inside a room that shouldn't have existed. It wasn't big. It wasn't sinister. It didn't scream horror. No blood on the walls. No flickering lights. No creatures breathing in the corners. That would have been easy. That would have made sense. Instead, room 37 greeted him with a quiet, brutal familiarity that unmade him in seconds. It was his childhood bedroom, down to every last detail. The same crooked lamp he'd broken when he was 10 and sworn he didn't touch. The same tiny sticker on the headboard his sister had stuck there while he was asleep. The same water stain on the ceiling, shaped like a rabbit he used to talk to at night when his parents were screaming in the kitchen. He hadn't seen this room in over 20 years, hadn't thought about it in over a decade. Yet here it was, preserved, waiting. Built from a memory he never meant to keep. He turned in slow circles, heart racing, looking for something, anything, that might explain why room 37 had taken this shape. There was no door behind him now, no exit, just 4 walls and a window that looked out into a black void filled with soft, pulsing fog. He leaned close, hoping to see something, but there was no landscape, no stars, just motion, like the fog was breathing. Behind him, the lamp clicked on. He hadn't touched it, and in the glow, he saw a figure sitting on the bed, his mother, but not the way he remembered her. Younger, calmer, dressed in the same floral nightgown she wore the night she died. She looked up at him with tired eyes, smiled faintly, and said one thing you never told them. He staggered back. Told who? She didn't answer. She just watched him. He closed his eyes, took a breath, reminded himself that this wasn't real. Couldn't be real. It was some kind of hallucination. A trick. A theater of memory playing back things he'd buried. But that's what made it worse. Because room 37 didn't show you horrors. It waited for you to supply them. It let you build your own punishment. He turned back to the window, avoiding her eyes. And now, outside, there was a house. Not the one he grew up in, but the house from the stories, from the forums. The one from the Mia Kessler tape. The house with no real shape, with numbered rooms and children who whispered backwards. The house that remembered every visitor. That absorbed their fears and returned them as architecture. The house in the fog was watching him. Its windows blinked like eyes. He turned from the window, heart now pounding like a drum in his ears, and faced the bed again. His mother was gone. In her place was a desk, on it a single sheet of paper, a blueprint, room 37. He picked it up. Read the notes. There were measurements for memory, dimensions for denial, an entire structure based on what he'd refused to accept his whole life. And at the bottom of the page, scrawled in ink darker than black, a sentence that didn't belong in any floor plan: what you don't believe still believes in you. Suddenly, the air shifted. like a hand closing around the entire room. The ceiling began to peel open, not break or collapse, but unroll like paper curling back. Above him was a mirror, endless, stretching into space, and reflected in it, he saw hundreds of versions of himself, each one standing in their own childhood bedroom, each one in a different year. Some were younger, some older, some were not quite human anymore. One was sobbing, one was laughing, one was pressing his hands against the ceiling. From the other side, they were all inside their own room 37s, all trapped in the same memory, the same architecture of disbelief. Mark screamed, and all the reflections screamed back at the exact same pitch, the same volume, the same hopeless delay. That's when he realized room 37 wasn't his room alone. It was a shared cell for every skeptic who had ever seen the door and insisted it meant nothing. Every person who told someone else to drop it or get help or just forget. The ones who'd mocked, questioned, dismissed. The house had saved a special place for them. Not as punishment, as foundation. Because the ones who deny are the ones who spread. They laugh, they talk. They share the myth because they believe it's fake. And in doing so, they hand it to others. They tell the story without knowing they're feeding the house. Mark backed away from the desk, the blueprint still in his hand. The paper burned hot. His fingers blistered. The lines began to shift on the page, no longer a layout but a map, leading to a door. Room 38. The walls around him folded in, crumpling like collapsing stage props. The bed dissolved into fog. The window sucked inward. The air screamed without sound. And in the final moment before everything vanished, a voice he hadn't heard since childhood spoke from nowhere. "You can leave, Mark, but you'll have to carry the blueprint." He fell, spiraling, through years, through other rooms, through memories that weren't his, until he hit the ground with a thud, on the floor of his apartment, back in the hallway, back where it all started. Except now, there was a new door in the wall, right across from room 37, this one smaller, painted a deep blue. No knob, but a name Eli Arom 38. He didn't know anyone named Eli, but he would. Eli had always prided himself on being level-headed, a straight thinker. Logic first, feelings later. He studied architecture not because he loved buildings, but because they made sense. Everything fit somewhere. Angles didn't lie. Measurements didn't shift depending on how scared you were. A well-drawn blueprint was truth in lines and graphite, predictable, stable, clean. It was the exact opposite of the chaos he grew up in, and it became his lifeline. So when his roommate Mark started unraveling, talking about voices in the wall, invisible doors, cassette tapes that played voices that shouldn't exist, Eli did what he always did, ignored it. At first. But then Mark handed him the page. It was burnt around the edges, brittle like it had been dug out of a campfire. The lines were tight, precise, almost beautiful. A room rendered in agonizing detail. And in the top corner, a name was written in small, almost apologetic handwriting, Eli, room 38. That stopped him. Because the handwriting was his own. Mark didn't explain. He didn't try to convince or elaborate or plead. He just said, "You're next," and locked himself in his room. That was 2 days ago. Eli hadn't seen him since, hadn't heard movement, and worst of all, he hadn't seen the door since either. But something else appeared. A scratch, barely noticeable at first. Just a faint line across the hallway wall, like someone had dragged a nail against the paint. But each time Eli walked past it, the scratch grew, extended, thickened, until it wasn't just a mark anymore, it was a seam. And now, standing before it at 3:12 a.m., Eli realized he couldn't pretend anymore. The blueprint hadn't just predicted his name, it had described his room. The measurements matched. The angle of the closet door, the height of the window, even the creak in the third floorboard from the entrance. Room 38 wasn't a number, it was a replica. And it was pulling itself out of memory, line by line. He pressed his hand against the seam, and it opened. Not like a door swinging on hinges, more like paper being peeled back. The wall tore with a sound like whispering scissors, and behind it, his childhood bedroom. Not the current version, the one he'd forgotten, the first one. With glow, in the dark stars still stuck to the ceiling, with the dent in the wall from the night he threw a chair during the storm, with the same faded poster of a roller coaster he was too afraid to ever ride. It was real, perfectly recreated. Except for one thing, the mirror. It was too clean, too new, and it watched him. He stepped into room 38, the door reformed behind him, seamless. Gone, he was inside. At first, nothing happened. Eerie wandered through the space, hands shaking, mouth dry. He opened drawers, pulled at the rug, lifted the mattress. Everything was exact, not just the items, but their placement. Even the dust patterns were right. That's when it hit him someone had reconstructed this room. Not guessed, not copied. Remembered it for him. Which meant room 38 wasn't about what he recalled. It was about what he refused to. The mirror pulsed, and then he walked in. Another version of Eli. Same clothes, same haircut, but younger, about 12 years old, eyes hollow, hands shaking, covered in dirt. He didn't look at Eli. He just walked to the closet, opened it, and stepped inside. Then slammed it shut. Eli ran after him. Opened the door. Nothing, just coats. Empty shelves. Shoes too small to wear. He turned back to the room. Now it was different. Not his room anymore, but a place he had seen only once and tried to forget forever. The basement of his neighbor's house. The one who used to watch him when his parents were working nights. The air smelled like rust and soap. The floor was concrete, stained with something that never quite washed out. And at the far end of the room, a folding chair with a cassette tape player on it. He didn't remember this. He didn't want to. But room 38 did. The tape inside the player was unlabeled, but he knew it was for him. He pressed play, and his own voice filled the room. Not adult Eli, child Eli. Whispering, crying, begging, I won't tell, please. I didn't say anything. Please don't lock the door again. Please, please. The tape clicked off. The room changed again. Now it was pitch black. Except for a single line of chalk on the floor, draw the door. Or stay. Eli fell to his knees. His hands moved without thinking. He sketched the shape he'd seen in the hallway. The same shape Mark had described before locking himself away. The same red door that appeared in thousands of threads online under hundreds of fake names. The door opened, and he crawled through. When Eli woke, he was on the living room floor. Daylight poured in. Mark was gone. His room was empty. Stripped, no furniture, no bed, not even dust. Just a piece of paper taped to the wall, room 39 in transit. Eli ran to the hallway, looked at the wall where room 38 had formed. Gone, no seam, just paint. But the glow, in the dark stars were now stuck to the ceiling in his room. The stars from his old bedroom, the ones he hadn't touched in 20 years. He tried to peel one off. It bled. Miles away from Eli, in a city that hadn't seen real darkness in years. Another night began like any other. Streetlights buzzed, windows blinked with television glow, and the hum of electricity filled the space between moments. Amid all that noise and light, Leela slept. And while she slept, the house found her. Leela didn't know about room 37. She hadn't heard the stories or read the threads. She wasn't a skeptic or a believer. Just another person trying to keep her life stitched together. A barista by morning, a student by night, and someone who never seemed to stop shaking from the inside, even when she smiled. Her dreams had always been strange, sure, but they'd never been cruel. Until now. That night, Lila dreamed of her own bedroom. Only the mirror was wrong. It wasn't hanging above her dresser where it usually sat. It was the dresser. A massive slab of polished black glass, where wood should have been. Stretching wider than any piece of furniture she'd ever owned. She couldn't see herself in it. Only movement. A ripple behind the surface, like the mirror was filled with water or smoke. She stepped closer. No reflection. Just a room on the other side. Familiar, but not hers. A copy of her current apartment, but older, worn, a little off, like it had been remembered wrong. The kind of wrong that made your chest tighten, because nothing specifically stood out, yet everything felt like it shouldn't exist. And then a sound, soft and low, like breathing through glass. Something on the other side was alive, watching, waiting. Leela reached out, and the surface bent, not cracked, not shattered. It folded like the mirror was a curtain pulled taut. She yanked her hand back, and that's when she saw it, a handprint forming from inside the mirror. Palm flat, fingers long and twitching, smudging the glass with slow, purposeful motion. It wrote something in the fog that hadn't been there seconds before. Come see what you forgot. Leela woke up gasping, drenched in sweat. The mirror on her real dresser was gone. In its place stood a tall, door-shaped panel of polished black glass, bolted to the wall where her bookshelves had been the night before. It didn't belong. It couldn't have been there yesterday, but it was there now, not leaning, installed, as if it had always been part of the room. She touched it, warm, slick, faint vibrations beneath her fingers, like a pulse. That's when she noticed something else. The wallpaper around the mirror had changed, only slightly, but enough. The pattern, once subtle vines, now looked like veins, crawling outward from the edges of the glass, spreading slowly along the wall like cracks forming under the skin of a lie. And in the center of the mirror, behind the glass, her reflection blinked. Even though she hadn't. The days that followed felt skipped. Leela would look up and hours had vanished. She found herself standing in rooms she didn't remember entering. Her journals, once empty, now had pages filled with cramped, looping handwriting she didn't recognize, repeating a single phrase again and again. The mirror remembers the version you abandoned. Her phone began auto, correcting words to fragments she didn't type. Room, remember, forget, come, don't. She tried smashing the glass. The hammer passed through it, like air. She tried to cover it. The sheet burned in her hands. She even called her landlord. But when he came to inspect it, the mirror wasn't there. He laughed, shrugged, and told her to get some sleep. When he left, the mirror had grown. Now it reached the ceiling, and the handprints had multiplied. Then came the night she saw herself walk out of it. It wasn't a trick of light or a fever dream. It was her. Same hair, same skin, same scars, but different. Paler, eyes sunken, smiling too wide. Mirror, Leela stepped into the room like she owned it, touched the floor like it was new, tilted her head and whispered, "You left me there." But the door stayed open. The real Leela couldn't move, couldn't scream. She watched as her reflection walked to her bed and sat, legs crossed, humming a tune she hadn't heard since she was 5. A song her mother used to sing before she left and never came back. Then, without warning, mirror, Leela stood, walked to the dresser, and pulled something from her pocket. A key. She slid it into the side of the glass. A click. A door-shaped seam spread across the mirror, and the panel opened inward. Behind it a long hallway, numbered doors on both sides, too many to count, all of them glowing with low, red light, all of them breathing. Time to come back, mirror, Leela said. Leela didn't resist. She stepped forward, and the glass closed behind her. Her apartment stayed empty for 3 days before her roommate returned. Books still on the shelf. Laptop still open. But the mirror was gone. All that remained on the wall were faint outlines of where the vines had spread, now burned into the paint. And on the desk, a note, written in the same looping script from her journals. Room 39 complete, memory stabilized. Next door forming. There was no signature. Only a sketch, a new door, not wood, not glass, but metal, and on it, a name, Caleb. Caleb never believed in ghosts, but he did believe in loss. The kind of loss that doesn't scream, but whispers. That presses itself into your chest like a wet cloth you can't peel off. He lived with it every day. His little sister, Leela, had vanished 3 weeks ago. No note, no fight, no police report that made sense, just gone. Her apartment was left untouched, rent paid, groceries in the fridge. It was as if she stepped out to check the mail and never came back. And the worst part, no one but him seemed to care. The world went on. Her landlord boxed up her things. Her school quietly dropped her from enrollment. Friends muttered awkward condolences and moved on. But not Caleb. He couldn't. Because on her desk, he'd found something that wouldn't let him forget. A sketch. Simple pencil on notebook paper. It looked like a door. Cold, clean, metal. Bolted at the edges with no knob, no hinges. Just an uneven seam down the middle. But what really stopped him was the name written across the top. Room 39 complete. He turned it over, no signature. But underneath, in small, scribbled letters, just one word: Caleb. He kept that drawing with him every day. Carried it folded in his wallet, touching it with the same trembling fingers that used to ruffle Leela's hair when she was little. He didn't know why. Maybe because it felt like the last thing she ever gave him. Maybe because part of him believed it was a message. Or maybe, just maybe, because every time he closed his eyes he saw the door. Not just in dreams, in flashes, in glass reflections, in dark corners of his basement when the light bulb flickered. And then one day, it was there. No warning, no noise, just a cold, seamless rectangle of metal standing against the far wall of his basement, right where the old boiler used to be before he had it removed. It hadn't been there the night before. But now, it was the only thing he could see. It wasn't bolted to the wall. It wasn't even attached. It just stood, silent and waiting, like someone had placed it there for him to find. And at the top, engraved in steel, sharp and precise, Room 40 Caleb. He ran, upstairs, out of the house, into the street. But his legs felt wrong, heavy, slow. Like the house didn't want him to leave. The door didn't open right away. It didn't need to. Because for the next few days, it lived in the corners of his life. When he showered, he heard knocking beneath the floorboards. When he slept, he dreamed of footsteps pacing outside his bedroom door. Heavy, slow, mechanical, like someone in steel boots walking in circles. The air in the house grew thick, not with smoke or smell, but with remembrance. Caleb couldn't think about Leela without crying. Couldn't hear her name without guilt. Because no matter how hard he tried to forget it, there was a truth buried beneath the pain. He hadn't called her back. Not when she left that voicemail. Not when she said she was scared. Not when she begged him to just come stay with her for a few nights until it stops looking at me. He'd brushed it off, called it anxiety, told himself she was just being dramatic. Now she was gone, and the house was building something out of that guilt, because the metal door was getting closer. He didn't move it. It moved itself, first pressed to the far wall, then 6 inches closer the next morning, then at the foot of the stairs, until finally, one night, he opened the basement door, and it was standing right there, inches from him, blocking the steps. Waiting. He stared at it for what felt like hours. His hand hovered near it, and for the first time it felt cold. Not physically, emotionally, like a memory frozen in steel. And then the seam split. Not open, not wide, just enough for him to hear what was on the other side. A voice, hers. "Caleb, you left me." He dropped to the floor, sobbing. Because it was true. He hadn't gone to her. He hadn't even tried. He just assumed she'd bounce back, like she always did. But Room 40 didn't want apologies. It wanted replicas. It wanted to recreate the moment of betrayal. Inside the door was nothing. A hallway of black metal and sound. No walls. No lights. Just footsteps. He stepped in. Because he couldn't not. Because grief has its own gravity. And Room 40 pulled him in like a memory refusing to be forgotten. The further he walked, the louder the sounds became. A tape rewinding. A child humming. A phone ringing. Each noise layered on top of the other until it formed a song of regret. He reached the end. Found himself staring at a steel table. On it, a single object, a cassette player. He picked it up. Pressed play. And his voice. His real voice. Came through, she begged. You ignored. She reached. You turned away. Now she's part of the house, and you're the door. The walls pulsed. His skin felt tight. Wrong. He looked down and saw seams forming along his arms, his chest, like his body was becoming a doorway. Because that's what the house did. It turned grief into architecture, guilt into hallways, memories into keys, and now Caleb wasn't a person anymore. He was room 40. Upstairs, the door disappeared. But in an apartment 4 states away, a girl named Renee woke from a nightmare she didn't remember having. And when she looked at the wall above her bed, she saw a shadow that didn't match her lamp. A rectangle. Cold. Waiting. And beside it, a message written in ash: Room 41 is listening. Renee had never been to the house. She hadn't read the threads, watched the tapes, or heard the whispers. And yet, somehow, it already knew her. The dream started a month before the shadow appeared on her wall. She didn't think much of them at first, just fragments of sound. A door creaking. A name whispered through static. A hallway that stretched too far, with too many turns. But each night, they got clearer, louder. And then, one morning, she woke with dust in her mouth. Not dust like from her apartment. This was older, thicker. The kind that tastes like ash and memory. At first, she thought she was just tired. Work had been brutal, and the long hours left her somewhere between sleep and consciousness most days. But then she began finding things. Notes she didn't remember writing. Scribbles in her sketchbook that looked like floor plans. Drawn in her hand but signed with someone else's initials. And always the same line, repeated over and over: Room 41 must not be built. The message didn't make sense, but it felt urgent. Like a warning delivered just a moment too late. Her friends didn't take her seriously. They laughed when she brought it up. Maybe you've been reading too many creepypasta threads, one of them joked. She hadn't. Not a single one. But when she finally searched Room 41 online, something happened that made her blood turn to ice. Her screen didn't load. It turned black. And in the center, red text appeared: Welcome back, Renee. We've been waiting. She slammed her laptop shut. The apartment went quiet. Too quiet. Like every hum of the city had gone still. No traffic, no neighbors, not even the buzz of the refrigerator. Just silence so deep it had weight. That night, the shadow on her wall took shape. It was subtle at first, just a rectangle slightly darker than the rest of the room. But by the time dawn crept through her blinds, it had depth. Texture, a faint outline of hinges. And in the middle, drawn as if from beneath the paint itself, a handle. She hadn't drawn it. She was sure of that. But when she checked her fingers, they were stained with graphite. Renee tried to stay awake. She drank coffee, paced the apartment, left the lights on. But sleep came anyway. It always did. And this time, the dream was different. She wasn't in her apartment. She was somewhere underneath it. A basement she didn't have. Long corridors stretched in every direction, lined with doors of every size and shape. Some wooden, some glass, some rusted so deeply they bled color into the floor. As she walked, the numbers changed: Room 20, Room 33, Room 37, Room 40, then blank doors. Then hers, Room 41. It wasn't built yet. Only the outline stood, sketched in glowing chalk against a concrete wall. And in front of it, sitting cross-legged on the ground, was a boy. Maybe 12, maybe older. His eyes were hollow, his voice a whisper inside her mind. You're drawing it into place. She shook her head. I don't know what this is. He stood, slowly. Shadows poured off his shoulders like smoke. It wants you to. That's how it grows. You think it's just a dream, but you're remembering it wrong. Renee backed away, but the hallway shifted behind her, closed. The only way out was through Room 41. Even unfinished, the space radiated pressure. Like standing next to a power line humming with secrets. She stepped closer and felt her bones ache. The chalk began to write itself. Lines snapping into place, walls forming from thought, memories folding into corners she didn't know she had. She screamed. Woke up. fell out of bed, gasping. The wall where the shadow had been, now solid metal, the handle real. The number 41 etched in clean white paint, and her reflection, faintly visible in the steel, had no eyes. She packed a bag, left the apartment, tried to check into a hotel. But every room had the same number. No matter what floor she tried, room 41. Every mirror showed the door behind her, even when she stood in front of a blank wall. And that's when she understood. The room wasn't just being built around her. She was the architect. The dreams weren't visions. They were blueprints. She was designing the door in her sleep, adding pieces from her own memories, her guilt, her fear. Every regret poured concrete into the foundation. Every mistake became a hinge. And every time she denied it, the house added another floor. That night, when she finally returned home, the door was wide open. A low wind howled from inside, cold damp, smelling of pencils, sweat, and something worse, wet charcoal. She stepped through, and behind her, the wall sealed shut, no knob, no lock, just silence. Room 41 wasn't just unfinished, it was unstable. Renee felt it the moment she crossed the threshold. The air was thick, not just with moisture or cold, but with something heavier. Like she was walking into a memory that didn't want to be remembered. The floor wasn't solid wood or concrete. It shifted. Not literally, but in perception. One moment, it was carpet from her childhood home. Then it was checkered linoleum like her old high school bathroom. Then a smooth, mirror-like surface that reflected only her mistakes. The room was alive with indecision. It hadn't decided what it wanted to be yet. And worse, it was hungry for her help. The door behind her vanished. No knob, no frame, just a wall that hadn't been there seconds before. She turned slowly, trying to take in the space. It was big, too big for the building she lived in. The ceiling disappeared into darkness, and the walls didn't meet at right angles. They leaned in awkwardly, as if they'd been built by someone trying to describe a house, but forgetting how rooms were supposed to fit together. Every surface was blank, featureless. But when she blinked, things appeared. A bed from a hotel she'd once stayed in while running from a breakup. A bookshelf filled with copies of the same journal she burned after her mother died. A desk she hadn't seen since college, still carved with the initials of someone who hurt her and never said sorry. It was building itself from her. And not just her memories, the things she avoided thinking about. The floor beneath her feet began to pulse with a sound she hadn't heard in 20 years, a metronome ticking, the one her piano teacher used to slam against the table when she got a note wrong. Tick, tick, tick. Each beat made the room twist slightly, shifting its angles, flexing like a muscle being stretched. Then the lights flickered. Except there were no lights. Just sudden illumination, without source or logic. In the center of the room, a table appeared. On it, a stack of papers, drawings, pages from her sketchbook, ones she'd never made but knew were hers. Each one a door, each labeled Room 43, Room 44. And on the last page, a blank door. No number, no design. Just a caption, "The final room begins with you." Renee stepped back, heart slamming. A voice rose from the walls. Not loud, not whispering, just certain. "You didn't build this alone." A figure appeared across the room. Her father. But not as she remembered him. He was younger. Smiling. Wearing the coat he'd been buried in. He stepped forward, arms wide. "I've missed you, kiddo." She didn't move. "You're not real." The figure's smile didn't fade. "Does it matter? You dreamed me into the walls. You etched me in. You made room 41 out of grief. But someone else is drawing the next one, Renee, and they need your help." The table caught fire. No smoke. Just flame. Quiet. Blue. The drawings didn't burn. They glowed. One lifted itself into the air, turned slowly, and revealed a name on the back: Braden, room 42. Renee didn't know anyone named Braden. But as the room began to shudder, as the lines between reality and memory blurred into static, she felt something she hadn't in weeks: clarity. She wasn't meant to survive room 41. She was meant to pass the blueprint on, to warn the next architect. She reached for the drawing. The flame kissed her fingers but didn't burn. The paper folded itself, slid into her jacket, and then everything collapsed. The floor vanished. The walls folded inward. Her breath caught. And she fell, not through space but time. Through moments of her life she thought were forgotten. Through every second she refused to forgive herself. Until she woke up, in her apartment, gasping, sweating, and holding a page in her hand, the drawing of a door, labeled Room 42 Braden. On the back, written in her own handwriting, "You don't build it, you remember it." 2 states away, a boy named Braden sat up in bed, heart racing. He just had the worst dream of his life. A door with his name on it. And someone on the other side whispering his own secrets back to him. Braden hadn't spoken to anyone in over a week, not really. Sure, he'd nodded to the barista at the corner cafe and muttered thanks to the delivery guy, but real conversation, connection, that had died the moment his brother disappeared. The police called it a mental health episode. Said he probably wandered off. But Braden knew better. Because the last thing his brother had said, with cracked lips and wild eyes, was, "It's building my door, Bray. Don't let it find you too." He had laughed when he heard it, thought it was a bad joke, another breakdown in a long line of them. But when his brother never came back, and all that was left was a drawing, an impossible sketch of a door labeled Room 40, Braden stopped laughing. He burned the drawing. Watched it curl and blacken in the sink until only ash remained. That night, he dreamed of the fire relighting itself, and a hand, his brother's, reaching through the flame to hand him a new drawing. Room 42. Braden woke with his fingers blistered, and the sketch on his pillow. Not similar to the one he burned. Identical. Same scratchy lines. Same label. Same subtle indentation in the corner where his brother's initials had been pressed, half erased but still there. That day, his apartment changed. Subtly at first. Angles didn't meet right. Doors stuck where they hadn't before. The mirror in the hallway reflected light in the wrong direction, casting shadows from windows that didn't exist. And worst of all, the hallway stretched. Just a little. Enough that walking from the bedroom to the kitchen took a few seconds longer. He tried to write it off. Told himself he was sleep, deprived, grieving, slipping, until he heard it, knocking, from inside the wall. Not once, not random, but steady, intentional. 4 knocks, then silence. Every night at 2:13 a.m., he tried recording it. The camera would freeze. He tried sleeping at a friend's house. The knocking followed him. One night, he finally knocked back, 4 times. A pause. Then the wall answered, "Room 42 is ready." The next day, Braden packed a bag. He didn't know why. Didn't know where he was going. Just knew. He walked for hours without direction, until he found himself standing in front of a building he didn't recognize. An old, sun-bleached warehouse at the edge of town, fenced in with rusted chain links and sagging signs that read "Codem Ndidi." Except the gate was open, and inside, at the far end of the lot, was a door standing by itself, freestanding, unsupported by walls or frames. It was metal, painted dark blue, bolted at the seams, and at the top a small engraved plaque, "Room 42 Braden." He stepped closer, pulse in his ears, sweat on his neck. Every instinct screamed to run, but something deeper, quieter, pulled him forward. Because this wasn't just a door, it was a memory. And when he reached for the handle, he realized it wasn't cold. It was familiar. Like something he'd held before, but long since buried. The door opened without a sound. Inside was a space he'd seen only once before, and tried desperately to forget. A hospital hallway, long, white, sterile, but warped. The lights buzzed with whispers. The walls dripped with something thick and gray. The air smelled like endings. And at the far end of the hall, a single gurney sat beneath a flickering bulb. His brother lay on it, eyes open, breathing shallow, hands tied with velvet ribbon. Next to the bed, a tape recorder. Playing a loop, you ignored him. You left. You ran. Now he's the hallway. Braden stumbled forward, hands trembling. No, he whispered. I tried to help, but the walls shook with laughter. Not loud, not cruel, just resigned. Like the house knew better. Like it had heard every lie before. The gurney dissolved. The hallway collapsed inward, and Braden found himself back in his apartment. Or so it seemed. Except this apartment had no windows, no exit, just a mirror. And behind the glass, his reflection blinked. But he hadn't. Then it spoke, in his brother's voice. You drew this, Braden. Now you're inside it. The lights cut out. The walls began to hum. And one final message appeared on the mirror in fog, room 43 forming. Architect Renee, somewhere else. Renee woke from her sleep, again, sweating. Screaming. She didn't remember the dream, but the pencil in her hand had drawn another door. This one bigger, darker, wider, and this time there was no name, just a number, room 43. And in the silence of her apartment, a second pencil began to move itself, sketching, without a hand to guide it, because the house didn't need consent anymore. It had momentum, it had memory, it had belief. Room 43 didn't begin with a person. Not a memory, not a regret, not even a name. It began in silence. Not the absence of noise, but the suppression of it. The kind of silence that waits behind closed mouths and locked doors. The kind that grows when no one speaks the truth. The kind that lingers, thick as tar, long after the screaming has stopped. For the first time, the house created a room on its own. Not from a sketch, not from a dream, but from hunger. And hunger has no shape, so it made one. The space appeared overnight in a building no one had ever seen before. Not marked on any map. Not listed in any registry. Just there. Black stone instead of brick. Windows that never showed light. A single stairwell that led only down and down and down again. No door at the entrance. No door at the bottom. Just a hallway that looped in on itself. And at the very end, room 43. It wasn't numbered at first. But then people started showing up. People who shouldn't have known it existed. People drawn to the place by dreams they couldn't shake. A delivery driver from Ohio who claimed he kept seeing a door inside his rearview. A teenage girl from Vermont who woke up with a key in her mouth. A woman from Texas who dug up a steel doorknob in her backyard that read room 43 West. They didn't know each other. They didn't speak the same language. But they all ended up in the same place. Standing in front of a door that should not have been there. And that's when it named itself. Right before their eyes, words burned across the surface of the wood, not carved but seared. Room 43, all welcome. The door opened inward. The people entered, one by one, some with hesitation, others with a strange, compulsive calm. None of them came out. Not really. Because room 43 didn't consume them the way the others had. It copied them. Built replicas, reflections, faulty prints, like photographs developed in murky water. Outside the building, witnesses began to speak of strange encounters. A man delivering food to an empty lot, only to hand the bag to himself. A woman on the subway who saw her dead brother sitting 3 rows down, smiling like nothing had ever happened. A child who pointed at their reflection and said, "That's the version of me who screamed when I wasn't supposed to." The house wasn't satisfied with memory anymore. It wanted multiples, options. It began experimenting. Inside room 43, there were rows of doors. Not numbered, labeled. What if? Almost. Could have been. Shouldn't have. And behind each one, a version of a person made from dust and desire. Renee saw it first in her sketchbook. Drawings she didn't remember making of people she had never met. Faces repeating. Slightly different each time. As if her hands were recreating the guests of room 43 without ever having seen them. One sketch stood out. A boy with no mouth. A girl with 3 shadows. A man whose eyes were covered in mirrors. She couldn't explain it. But when she blinked, the pages were wet. Not with water, with ink that moved. That night, someone knocked at her door. Not 4 knocks, not frantic, just one. Soft, measured. She didn't answer. The next morning, the sketchbook was gone. And in its place, a single word etched into her desk soon. Back in the black stone building, room 43 continued to grow. It didn't need memories anymore. It didn't need pain. It was replicating identity. A machine that studied fear and spat out new blueprints. And somewhere in that hall of infinite doors, something opened that should never have existed. A door labeled original, no handle, no hinges, just a crack of light around the edges. And from behind it, a voice whispered one word in every language known to man architect. Because the house had found what it was truly searching for. Not just pieces of people, not just sorrow or loss, but the source. The first dreamer. The one who planted the seed long before the house existed. And if that door opened fully, the house would no longer need to build one room at a time. It would build all at once. Everywhere. Meanwhile, in a quiet town on the edge of nowhere, a man named Ellis began waking up at exactly 3:43 a.m. every night, drenched in sweat, his ears ringing with the sound of keys turning in locks that didn't exist. He didn't know why. He didn't remember anything strange until the mail came. An envelope with no return address. Inside it, a floor plan, detailed, precise. And in the center, one room circled in red, room 44 Ellis. No explanation, no warning, just that. And on the back of the page, written in unfamiliar handwriting, it started with you. It will end with you. Ellis had never believed in monsters. Not really. As a kid, he'd feared the dark like any other child, but not because he thought something was in it. He feared the silence, the kind that settles behind closed doors, the kind that follows after something terrible happens and everyone pretends it didn't. That fear didn't come from fairy tales or ghost stories. It came from his own home. From the night he made a choice so small, so ordinary, that he barely remembered it until now. The envelope hadn't left his desk in days. He tried tossing it, tried burning it. But every morning, it reappeared untouched, unbent, unburned. The floor plan inside hadn't changed, except for the circle. The red ring around room 44 had grown thicker, darker, almost wet. And every time Ellis looked at it, his ears filled with a low, metallic groan, like something shifting beneath the floorboards. Like beams settling under a weight that didn't exist yesterday. He didn't know why they'd chosen him. He'd never dreamed of doors. He hadn't drawn them, hadn't seen them. But deep inside, something stirred. A memory long buried beneath decades of silence. A sound he hadn't heard since childhood. A key turning, clicking, sliding into place. He began seeing it in corners, places where no room should exist. A seam along the wall of his hallway. A faint number forming on the back of his bathroom mirror, fogged into glass 44. His bookshelves leaned at the wrong angle. His coat rack cast a shadow longer than the wall allowed. And at night, when he closed his eyes, he dreamed of a house with no walls, only doorways, endless, growing, calling. And always a voice at the center whispering, "You opened the first." He stopped sleeping, started pacing. His apartment became unfamiliar. He felt watched, but not from the outside. From within, like the walls themselves had eyes. He tore up the floorboards, ripped out the drywall, found nothing, except, behind the baseboard in his bedroom, a gap. An envelope, yellowed with age. Inside it a drawing, a crude sketch done in crayon, on the back of a grocery receipt from 1986. It showed a door simple, childlike, and a name written in block letters at the top: Ellis's room. Do not open. He didn't remember drawing it. Didn't remember that house. Didn't even remember living anywhere with a basement. But the drawing knew. The handwriting was his. Underneath, in smaller letters, "It wants to come out now." Ellis began digging through old records. Found a single box in his attic labeled Mom's Things. Inside photographs, faded, torn. But one caught his eye, a picture of him as a boy, standing next to a door in a concrete hallway. Behind him, a wall of cinder block. His face looked strange. Not scared, not happy, just resigned. And on the back, written in his mother's handwriting, Ellis, 1987. After we closed the room, his hands trembled. He never remembered a basement, never remembered anything about that year, until the smell came back. The smell of wet brick and copper. The hallway behind the door had smelled like that. And then, like a wire snapping in the back of his mind, he remembered. He had opened a door when he was 6. A door no one told him existed. A door sealed behind a cabinet in the basement they never used. A door that whispered. He remembered sneaking down one night, barefoot and quiet, hearing a sound from below. A voice, soft and rhythmic. "You'll let me out if you're kind." He remembered turning the knob. A hallway. A room. Red light. He didn't go inside. He shouldn't have opened it. He didn't know how long it stayed open. He didn't know what came out. But his mother moved them 2 weeks later. Never spoke of it again. Never let him near a basement. She called it the house that gave up. Now he knew what she meant. The house hadn't died. It had spread. And room 44 wasn't a new construction. It was a return. That night the door appeared. Not built, not drawn, just there. Steel, rusted, breathing. The number etched in blood, colored paint, 44, no plaque. No welcome. Just a message scratched into the floor in front of it. As if with fingernails, "You are the hinge." Ellis didn't run. He knew it wouldn't help. He walked to the door and placed his hand on it. It pulsed beneath his palm, the way a throat does when someone is about to speak. He whispered, "Why me?" And the door answered. Not in words, but in memory. It showed him the faces of every person who had entered the rooms. Leela, Caleb, Renee, Braden, their reflections, their doubles, their shadows, and at the center of all of it something not human, not even close, but wearing his face, younger, smiling, standing at the mouth of the first hallway, holding a crayon, drawing on the wall. The door didn't need him. It was made from him. Because Ellis hadn't just opened the first door. He had designed it, and the house had been building ever since. Room 44 swung open. Inside, there was no floor, no walls, just a sky, gray, rotting, vast, and doors suspended in mid-air, spinning slowly, orbiting something massive in the center, something shaped like a man, but not a man, and it turned to face him. No eyes, just doors where the face should be. They all began to open at once, and 1,000 voices spoke in unison. "We remember you, Ellis. You forgot us, but we never forgot you." The doors didn't scream. They whispered. That was worse. Thousands of them spinning in the sky of room 44, each creaking open just enough for the darkness behind them to breathe. The figure at the center, shaped like a man but made of rooms, turned toward Ellis with a slowness that wasn't sluggish. It was ritual. Like every motion meant something. Like the house itself was waiting for this exact moment. And Ellis, though frozen in place, knew it too. Deep in the bones that remembered things he'd spent a lifetime trying to forget. He'd drawn the first door, not with tools, not with intention, but with longing. As a child, hiding from the fights upstairs, wishing for a room of silence, of escape. Somewhere else, somewhere away. He didn't know it then, but the house had heard him. It had always been listening. For anyone willing to imagine. That's how it spread. Not through blueprints or maps, but through the idea of a room where you could lock your guilt away and never answer for it. And Ellis had been the first to believe in that idea completely. Now, standing beneath the impossible sky of room 44, he was finally being shown the cost. The man-shaped figure with door, faces lifted one arm, and from the air, one of the spinning doors descended. Slowly, reverently. It hovered before Ellis, trembling like a frightened animal. On its face, room 45, architect. He didn't touch it. He couldn't. But it opened anyway. Inside, he saw a hallway, narrow, flickering with old light. And at the far end, a small version of himself. A boy holding a crayon, staring up at an empty wall, deciding where the next door should go. But the hallway began stretching, pushing the boy further and further away. until the child disappeared into the distance and the hallway twisted back toward Ellis, forming a spiral. Each curve of the spiral had a door. Each door had a name. Not just names of those lost in the house, his names. Every identity he'd tried on, every version of himself he'd buried. The boy who wanted to vanish. The teen who ran away. The man who kept quiet when he should have spoken up. All of them behind their own labeled rooms. He felt the weight of every one. Room 3 the lie. Room 8 the silence. Room 17 the escape. Room 29 the mirror. And finally Room 45 the return. He stepped inside. It was his childhood home, not a memory, a reconstruction. Down to the water, stained wallpaper, and the sound of the refrigerator humming out of rhythm. The door at the base of the stairs, the one that had never quite closed properly, was wide open. The basement waited. He walked down, slower than he ever had because he already knew what he'd find at the bottom. The first door, the real room 1, still there, still humming, but this time there was something different. A mirror stood beside it, not dusty, not cracked, clean, and inside it, a reflection of himself, not older, not younger, but honest, tired, worn, but finally awake. The voice from the house spoke again, but this time not in whispers. It echoed, through wood, through blood, through the space between thoughts. You made the door, but you never walked through it. Now you must decide. Ellis looked between the door and the mirror. One led deeper, into the house, into memory. The other was just a reflection. But as he stared, the mirror began to flicker, and he saw the faces of every person the house had touched. Caleb, Leela, Renee Braden, dozens more, all locked in rooms of their own pain, echoes of lives twisted by the doors they never meant to open. He thought of every drawing, every knock, every hallway that grew from a moment of guilt no one ever faced. The house hadn't been feeding on death or fear. It had been feeding on denial. Because if you build enough doors to hide your shame, eventually, you forget which one leads out. And now the house was full. It didn't need more architects. It needed a lock. He stepped toward the mirror. Not to escape, but to remember. To pull the house into himself and close it from within. Because he finally understood the house was never a place. It was a pattern. A trap made from pain that didn't get spoken. 1,000 rooms of almost, if only, and not now. He touched the mirror, and everything stopped. No light, no sound, no breath, just a single, final word closed. In an apartment 2 states away, Renee woke up gasping, unsure why she felt lighter. Her sketchbook was empty, clean pages, no drawings, no numbers, the shadow on her wall, gone. In a small town in Vermont, Braden stepped outside and saw, for the first time in weeks, a sunrise that didn't feel heavy. In a quiet cemetery in Ohio, a grave that used to read missing now bore a date. Leela Donovan, 1997-2025, no longer lost, just resting. There were no more knockings. No more dreams. The house was gone, sealed in the memory of one man who finally chose to face what he'd built. And somewhere beneath the earth, in a space that no longer touched time, room 45 sat still, not waiting, not growing. Just a door with no handle, no lock, no name. Because not every room has to be entered. Some are meant to end, and this one did. Completely.